year 2025. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Senator Daly. Senator Dondero Liu.
Here.
Senator Hansen.
Here.
Senator Nguyen.
Here.
Senator Scheibel.
Here.
Senator Titus. Assembly Member Backus.
Present.
Assembly Member Hafen.
Here.
Assembly Member Hansen.
Here.
Assembly Member Watts.
Here.
Assembly Member Yeager.
Here.
And Chair Howdigi.
Thank you. It looks like we have 3 members attending in Carson City, 7 members attending down here in Las Vegas, and it looks like we have Member Hafen attending remotely. Please mark Dr. Titus present when she arrives. We expect her to join us in Carson City. We have a quorum present, and before we begin, I do have a few housekeeping items to go over. If anyone present or listening today would like to receive a copy of the Commission's agendas, minutes, or reports, you may be added to our mailing list by following the links on the Legislature's website. Contact information for staff is also listed on our website. In addition, we accept written comments that may be emailed or mailed before, during, or after this meeting. The information regarding where to send written comments is also on the website and listed on the agenda for this meeting. That brings us to agenda item number 2, public comment. We will be accepting public comment at this time from persons here in the Nevada Legislature office building in Las Vegas. We will then move to Carson City, and finally, we will take public comments by phone. If you prefer to wait to speak until later, there will be a second period for public comment at the end of the meeting. Please remember that public comment is limited to not more than 2 minutes per person. And if there are any people in our audience here in Las Vegas, I see you approaching the table, please fill the witness table and then we will start down here. Again, I would like to remind everyone we do limit public comment to not more than 2 minutes. If you have further public comment, again, you can submit those in writing to our committee secretary while you're here. With that, we can go ahead and start public comment down here in Las Vegas. Please remember to state your name and spell it for the record and begin.
Madam Chair and Commission members, Jana Wright, JANA WRIGHT, Las Vegas, speaking in opposition to NDOW Regulation R014-25 coyote killing contests. I hold the opinion that killing mammals for prizes or money is morally reprehensible. It gives hunting a black eye. Why the Wildlife Commission brought this forward, regulating a non-protective species, is questionable at best. This goes against the North American model for wildlife conservation, killing wildlife for non-frivolous reasons, wanton waste of wildlife, killing for a non-legitimate reason, and there was zero science used in creating this regulation. Contest participants shoot from the back of a truck at night using military-grade equipment for night vision and thermal imagery. Is this fair chase or even ethical hunting? Nevadans do not support these contests, as indicated by a poll taken by Remington Research Group in 2024. All 4 congressional districts and both major political parties were included in the poll. The Wildlife Commission did not have an appetite to require daily bag limits, carcass removal, salvaging the pelts, requiring hosts to display their BLM special use permit to have these contests on public lands. There is so much wrong in this regulation. Please hear it separately and deny. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We can go to the next witness.
Stephanie Myers, MYERS, Las Vegas. Despite the fact that the vast majority of Nevadans want coyote killing contests to be banned, the State Wildlife Commission thinks they can regulate their way out of the uncomfortable position they find themselves in. People like me are speaking up. about these killing contests with their circus atmosphere and gaudy prizes of cash, guns, and belt buckles. The wildlife commissions think they can impress you, legislators, that they are really doing something about this problem when it's all smoke and mirrors. These proposed regulations of a 7-month season and required hunter license do absolutely nothing. They say they need these contests to protect livestock, but there are non-lethal ways to do that. And because coyotes are an unprotected species in the state, they can be killed 24/7, 365 days of the year by anyone. Science shows that when coyotes are mass killed in a particular area, the females go into high gear reproduction. So the contests are ineffective toward that goal, nor do they boost game species numbers or provide for pet safety. In these contests, technically advanced calling devices and night vision glasses are used. Fair chase is not considered. Rotting carcasses, decay roadside. Do the proposed regulations address these important problems? No, they don't. Don't let the Wildlife Commission get away with this deception. Reject these proposed regulations and send them back to the Wildlife Commission with orders to do some real scientific research and studies. We need our state wildlife commission to open the door to broader public participation. We are not going away. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Myers. Next.
Good morning, everyone. Anula Wildrich, WYLDERICH. It's significant to know, and I'm addressing the same issue. It's significant to note that the Clark County Advisory Board to Manage Wildlife had voted against these regulations. And as a 21-year resident of this state, I'm frankly surprised that we're looking to legitimize these contests while other states are banning them. Killing contests abandon fair chase, as the previous speakers mentioned, and sound wildlife management. Hunting should reflect respect for the land and the animal. And turning it into a prize-driven spectacle undermines the responsibility and honor that true sportsmen stand for. This indiscriminate killing disrupts and destabilizes ecosystems and leads to more coyotes, not fewer. So how do we explain this to residents who are concerned about their pets or other animals? In a state that's defined by rugged beauty and wild heritage, celebrating cruelty for prizes betrays both Nevada's values and our responsibility to manage wildlife with ethics, evidence, and respect, and Nevada should not be going backwards. I urge you to deny them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. Warren Hardy here on 2 regulations today. The first on behalf of the Nevada Pest Management Association, Regulation R127-23. We want to thank the department on that. That's been a long time coming and is a major game changer for the industry to be able to have this kind of ability to train on the job. We really saw the exposure during COVID, and this is a massively helpful regulation, and we are fully in support. I'm also here on behalf of Humane World for Animals, formerly the Humane Society of the United States. I want to just quickly, in my last minute and 45 seconds, focus on the procedure of this. We brought a regulation forward in good faith as residents and citizens of Nevada to outlaw hunting contests. That regulation was rejected, which is the prerogative and the right of the commission to do. And that's where it should have ended. In our opinion, there's a lot of feeling out there that this was a retaliatory action to say, hey, we're not only going to not do what you want us to do, we're going to do the exact opposite. And I think that's troubling. I'm not saying it's illegal. I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm saying it could have a chilling effect on the desire of Nevadans to come forward and participate in the regulatory process. The second thing I would say is this even if we did support a regulation, this is not a regulation. This does nothing more than legitimize in statute this practice, which, as previous speakers have indicated, violate almost every tenet of ethical hunting. So the statement Nevada, the state will make by adopting this regulation is, we don't care. These kinds of things are open, they're free. They're already open and free. Why do they need the legislative's explicit approval? Additionally, as I said, it doesn't do anything. It defines a contest. It requires a hunting license and it sets a season. I think if you read NRS 501-105, it says the commission shall adopt policies and adopt regulations necessary for the preservation, protection, management, and restoration of wildlife in its habitat. Nothing in the backup document does any of those things or suggests they even tried to do any of those things. In fact, it does the exact opposite. In there, it says there are no biological impacts, biological and economic, but for our purposes, there are no biological impacts of this regulation. By definition, that doesn't meet the standard in 501. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to provide public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will move to Carson City. I would like to remind everyone that you are limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to provide a public comment? Thank you. Please state your name for the record and spell it, and you can begin when you are ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Goff, R-E-B-E-C-C-A, G as in girl, O, F as in Frank, F as in Frank. And I'm the Nevada State Director for Humane World for Animals, formerly known as the Humane Society of the United States. We urge you to reject LCB file number RO14-25 relating to coyote killing contests. The Board of Wildlife Commissioners passed these regulations in an apparent retaliation to our comprehensive petition for a rule to ban wildlife killing contests. That petition had broad public support and was backed by the best available science. But instead of banning these contests, the board chose to endorse and sanction them by promulgating these regulations before you. For the November meeting, hundreds of Nevadans testified in opposition to these regulations, which again, the board ignored. It's inexplicable why the board is set on legitimizing killing contests, even when ethical hunters condemn them. 10 states now prohibit them, 6 in the West, including Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and California. 6 of the 10 states went through the state wildlife commissions because they saw them as embarrassing and wanted to protect the reputations of their hunters. The board's authority to pass regulations is limited to rules necessary for the prevention, protection, management, and restoration of wildlife in their habitats. Meeting this statutory authority requires the incorporation of science, but the board presented no science to support these regulations. In sum, these regulations serve no wildlife management purpose, were promulgated outside the scope of the board's authority, and aim only to punish Nevadans who want to protect the wildlife from this horrific blood sport. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in Carson City wishing to provide public comment? You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is George Forbush, and I'm representing the Nevada Predator Hunting Association. I wasn't planning on talking, but after hearing everything, I just couldn't sit by. A lot of what you've heard today just now, I don't agree with. I think you're being completely misinformed. We were a part of these negotiations and discussions, and the Humane Society of America never came forward at any point in time and tried to propose their own regulations. They simply wanted a ban this whole entire time, and the reason why the Wildlife Commission moved forward to go forward with a hunting license and a season is because we came forward and we showed them that we aren't doing anything wrong and we are acting ethically and appropriately when we go hunting, no different than the guys and gals that go hunting for chucker or do the fishing derbies. And we just asked for a regulation so we could have some parity, just like what they have. Because I've been to this legislature before with some of you in the Natural Resource Committee where I've heard there's no regulation, there's no regulation. That's always been the argument. We've come forward and we tried to propose something. This is what we're proposing. They came to the table with nothing. All of the arguments you heard that they're telling you right now, the commission heard, and they were unpersuasive. And this has been going on for a year, and now they're going to try to spend 2 minutes individually each time to try to persuade you otherwise. And I would ask you, please go ahead and put your faith in what the commission did. And the commission is not the enemy here. These people, being the advocates, asked for this. They're the ones that wanted to have these meetings. The sportsmen did not. We were completely content with this being left alone where it was left to be legal. But they kept coming, and now this is the result, and now they're upset about it. So I ask you to pass this, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Would you do me a favor and please spell your name for the record? Thank you.
Sorry, it's George Forbush, Forbush.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Carson City wishing to give public comment? Okay, seeing no one approach the witness table, AVH, can we please go to the telephone lines? And I will remind everyone on the telephone that we do limit public comment to 2 minutes per person.
To participate in public comment, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue.
Yes, my name is Iris Stone. I have a comment regarding the elections procedures manual. Is this the right time to do it, or do I have to wait until we get to that item on the agenda? It wasn't clear to me.
This is the appropriate time to give comment. If you would start by please stating your name and spelling it for the record, and then you can go ahead and provide your testimony.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. My name is Iris Stone, IRISSTONE. I reside in Las Vegas. I'd like to bring up two issues regarding the updates that were made to the elections procedures manual. First, there's no reference to NRS 293.535 that allows for challenging a registered voter who is not a U.S. citizen or who has abandoned residence of counties. I request that that be included. My second item refers to pages 261 and 263 of the manual, the paragraph that describes examples of what is not personal knowledge. I request that this paragraph be removed or modified. Let me explain. The regulation would shut the door to any citizen or non-governmental organization that wants to help election officials maintain accurate voter rolls. Under NRS 293.5303, election officials are allowed to use the National Change of Address NCOA data to list maintenance. In 2023, Citizen Outreach Foundation, a nonpartisan organization, launched Project Pigpen with the sole purpose to maintain voter rolls. I volunteered for that project. We compared the entire voter roll with the NCOA data and then confirmed whether the individuals have registered to vote in another state. The Secretary of State initially advised us to submit our findings to the county officials, which we did. However, without notifying us, Secretary Aguilar later told the counties not to use our data and incorrectly characterize our work as a voter challenge or multiple voter challenges, even though we simply provided the data. More troubling is that Nevada pays a non-governmental organization called ERIC to do essentially the same thing. The difference is that ERIC only checks 26 states. The Pigpen team checks 44 states and does it at no cost to taxpayers. In summary, Nevada law requires election statutes to encourage participation, not restrict it. It limits citizens' involvement, contradicts existing statutes, and importantly, it institutes language that the governor vetoed in 2025 for these exact reasons. The regulation blocks citizens.
Ms. Stone, thank you for your comments. If you have further comments, you can please provide them to our secretary. We appreciate you being here and giving
I'm all done.
testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. AVH, can we move on to the next caller, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Gifford, ELLEN GI Frank ORD as in David. Nevada's 83rd session adjourned sine die on June 3, 2025, over 6 months ago. Assembly Bill 148 was passed and approved by the governor during that session. It became effective on October 1st, 2025. This bill amends NRS 293-269911, addressing the county clerk's distribution of mail ballots to voters. As of this morning, this Nevada revised statute still does not reflect the amendment, in spite of the fact the amendment has already gone into effect. Nevada citizens should not have to wait over 6 months to see the current version of a Nevada statute online. There are numerous reasons why the absence of this information could negatively affect Nevada citizens. It also affects timely development of Nevada administrative code. This delay occurs regularly after each legislative session. NRS 218E175 states in part, in addition to the powers conferred and duties imposed by this title or any law or resolution, the Legislative Commission, in order to carry out its general objectives and functions, may receive recommendations and suggestions for legislation or investigation from individual citizens. Referring to this statute, I respectfully recommend to the Legislative Commission that there be an investigation into how the issue of delay in the Legislative Council Bureau's updating of revised statutes can be properly resolved. I look forward to your action and thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. ABH, can we move on to the next caller, please?
Good afternoon. For the record, Fred Volz, V as in Victor, OLTZ. Speaking to proposed regulation R014-25, the wording defies the charge given by 3 separate governors, multiple legislatures, representatives of 3/4 of the state's population, and multiple citizen petitions to solve the problem of mass wildlife killing contests staged for prizes. The Wildlife Commission and Department bypassed science and other biological truths in proposing a regulation that concerns only one wildlife species, not all species the potential target of such contests. Collecting minimal fees and setting an arbitrary season do not equate to regulating mass killing contests, unlike other hunted species. Zero necessity exists for this regulation because the act of buying NDOW licenses before engaging in a mass killing contest for prizes materially disrupts local ecosystems by creating an ecological vacuum and large-scale imbalance. The proposed regulation also does nothing to establish guidelines for how these contests operate or are overseen. The Wildlife Commission and Department have failed to demonstrate how this regulation will benefit the 98% of Nevadans who do not buy hunting and trapping licenses, or the best interests of wildlife belonging to all Nevadans, their statutory duty, and is thus completely unnecessary and ineffective. Proposed regulation R014-25 should be wholly rejected. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. ABH, can we go to the next caller?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Legislative Commission. My name is Naomi Dewar. That's NAOMIDUERR, and I'm a Reno City Council member for Ward 2. I'm participating in this hearing to ask you to reject the proposed regulations for coyote killing contests as proposed by the Wildlife Commission. Coyote killing contests are inhumane. They destroy and speak to the basest aspects of human beings, to destroy life for no useful purpose, just for the love of killing and prizes. Coyote killers may clothe their actions in good-sounding principles, but at the end of the day, there is just no rational justification for it. It gives legitimate hunters a bad name. Study after study has shown that these types of contests produce the opposite of the stated intent. Animals live within the natural carrying capacity of the land. Science shows that when you attempt to wipe out species in a particular area, they tend to come back more fruitfully than ever. Opening up the habitat triggers the urge to reproduce and in large numbers. The end result? More coyotes, not less. It's like trying to hold back the sea. Local governments are often learning laboratories for state policy and state regulation. And several years ago now, both the city of Reno and Clark County banned coyote killing contests from our jurisdictions. Our local governments cover about 75% of the people in Nevada, but not 75% of the land in Nevada. Most of the people in Nevada believe these contests are inhumane. The legislature needs to act on that. The Wildlife Commission has done their best to find common ground, but this is not really a subject that lends itself to that kind of compromise. Either you are okay with killing for killing's sake, or you are not. Attempting to whitewash the practice and sanitizing it with a requirement to obtain a hunting license does nothing to introduce reasonable wildlife management practices. Instead, I would suggest that the legislature take up this issue once again, and this time listen to the masses of people who do not approve of killing for killing's sake. I ask you to reject the Wildlife Commission's proposal, which is not designed to manage wildlife, but rather to kill it. Please do not adopt this ordinance or this regulation. It will only result in more death, not less. 10 states have banned coyote killing contests for prizes. We should too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Dewar. AVH, do we have any other callers?
If you have recently joined the call and would like to participate in public comment, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue.
Hello, this is David O'Mara. I'm a resident of Reno, Nevada, and I'm here to object to the proposed regulation regarding NRS 293.535, which is the written challenge pursuant to that statute. I believe that this statute is one of political instead of one of legislative, following the legislature's intent. There are many, many problems with this regulation. First of which is that statute does not allow for the Secretary of State to prescribe a form. The statute specifically says an affidavit can be produced and therefore no form is necessary. More importantly, Secretary of State's regulations, while it wants to have a prescribed form, also wants to include additional information that is not required under the statute and therefore is outside of what a regulation should do. For example, the regulation does not require anyone to provide the phone number of the person who is being challenged, only the address. That is simply because all they need is an address, because the Register of Voters only needs to provide a notice through the address. There is no statutory authority for the Register of Voters to then contact the individual to have any conversation with them. Additionally, the number of the precinct in which the person whose right to vote is challenged is also outside the statute, and quite frankly contradicts the Secretary of State's position that we cannot use a database in regards to find that, because the only way you find someone's precinct is to go online and find their precinct of their registration form. So that clearly contradicts their requirement that personal knowledge has to be a precinct. The other thing that is required is that any documents or evidence support the facts upon which the grounds for the challenge is based. This is not a statute where we are trying to, beyond a reasonable doubt, prove someone is not a registered voter. The statute requires statements for the legislatures and the people to provide, so that the Register of Voters can provide a notice to all the people who have left our state, so that they know.
Mr. Amara, thank you so much for your comments. If you would just please spell your name for the record, and if you have further comments, please send them in to our secretary.
Thank you. O'Mara, O-M-A-R-A. Thank you.
Thank you. AVH, do we have any other callers?
The public line is open and working. However, there are no more callers at this time.
Thank you, AVH. Okay, committee members, that takes us to agenda item number 3, approval of the minutes. Commission members, you have in your packet the draft minutes for the Legislative Commission's meeting held on October 28th. These draft minutes are also available on our website. Let me first ask if there is any discussion on the minutes. I see Assemblymember Hafen shaking his head no. I don't see anyone in Carson City. Seeing no discussion at this point, I would accept a motion to approve the minutes for.
Move to approve.
Thank you. I have a motion by Speaker Yeager. Do I have a second? Have a second by Senator Nguyen. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, the motion carries. The minutes for the October 28th meeting of the Legislative Commission are approved. And that takes us to agenda item number 4, review of administrative regulations. There are 13 regulations that were submitted for approval pursuant to NRS 233B.067 and NRS 233B-0675. These regulations are all contained in the binder provided to members, and they are also posted on our website under the tab for this meeting. At this time, I will ask commission members if there are any additional regulations to be held for further discussion, aside from the ones that have been already sent to me. Once all those regulations are identified, then we will take a motion to approve the remaining regulations and come back to the regulations held for discussion. Commission members, the following regulations have been asked to be pulled. Regulation R014-25, which was requested by Assemblymember Backus. R022-25, which was requested by Assemblymember Watts. R026-25, which was requested by Senator Dondero Loop. R045-25, which was requested by Senator Daly. Commission members, are there any other regulations that you would like pulled for discussion?
Madam Chair, I'd like R05325.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Are there any other regulations? Okay, are there any other commission members in Carson City who would like to pull regulations? Okay, Assemblymember Hafen. Okay, I see you shaking your head. No. Is there anyone in Las Vegas who would like to pull additional regulations? Okay. Seeing none, then at this point, I would be looking for a motion to approve the remaining regulations. Just before we go to that motion, I will repeat the regulations that were requested to be pulled for further discussion. We have R014-25, R022-25, R026-25, R045-25, R053-25. Okay, and now at this point, I would be looking for a motion to approve the remaining regulations under this item that were not pulled.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Speaker Yeager. I have a second by Senator Nguyen. Will those members in favor of the motion please signify by saying aye? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, the motion is approved. If you were here to answer questions on your regulation and your regulation was just approved, I will give you about 30 seconds so that you can sneak out of the meeting, and then we will move on to the regulations that have been pulled for further discussion. Okay, at this time, we will now go to the regulations that have been pulled for further discussion, and we will start with regulation R014-25 that was requested to be pulled by Assemblymember Backus. I believe we have someone in Carson City here to answer Assemblymember Backus's questions. If you are in Carson City, please approach the table. Assemblymember Backus, when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So my question is more of like one of procedural as opposed to the language of the regulation. When I was diving into this and then also looking at Nevada Administrative Code chapters 502 and 503, I was really trying to understand the statutory authority for this regulation. I understand under NRS 501.105 providing what the board can do in implementing regulations. But then I looked to other sections, specifically under Nevada Administrative Code 503.610 at sync, which would be addressing competitive field trials. And when I looked at that provision, I was able to cross-reference it with statutory authority that the legislature had put forth to implement such regulations. And so I've really been struggling with this because it seems like the regulations are like creating legal authority for something that didn't really exist by statute. So if someone can kind of explain that to me, I would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. For the record, Alan Janae, Director of Nevada Department of Wildlife. I am calling up our Chief Law Enforcement Officer, Christy Knight, and she will help you with that question. One moment.
Chief Christy Knight, KNIGHT, for the record. So what we were operating under is NRS 501.181, which is the duties and regulations that the commission shall. And one is the protection, propagation, restoration, transplanting, introduction, and management of wildlife in the state. And then uniformity of laws. So we were basing it off of NRS 501.181.
Madam Chair, if I may have a follow-up. So with respect to that, and that's what I was trying to understand, and maybe I just don't understand management of wildlife, because I saw that same terminology used in NRS 501.105. Can you kind of explain, like, I mean, when I think of a sport, I'm not thinking of that as like management. I didn't see in the regulations where there was any like additional information. Are we trying to control the population? And I'm really ignorant in this area. So I'm coming from a place where I just don't really understand it. I understand hunting when people go out there and hunt for food, for clothing, those kind of things. But when I think about this as a competitor sport, maybe it is to decrease the population. I just didn't really understand that. So if you can kind of elaborate on that, that would be helpful for me.
Thank you for the opportunity. And so when we think, again, for the record, Alan Janae, Director, Nevada Department of Wildlife, and so management would be any actions in which you're, having any influence on populations, wildlife populations. As you are familiar with the work of the department is that can mean often we're commenting on industrial development projects because indirectly they have that consequence on status of species. And so when you think about management, I would say that falls in that realm. Does that help with your question, ma'am?
It does and does not. I mean, I think of it as like right now we already have like an ability where you can do hunting and trapping. And I see this like more of like creating a sport. Like it's just, I'm just really struggling with it. But I thank you guys for your explanation and your support.
Committee members, are there any other questions? Okay, Senator Scheibel.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions. Mine is also procedural. We heard during public comment from a wildlife enthusiast who I understand does not speak for the department or for the board, but he suggested that, advocates for wildlife conservation and animal welfare had kind of pushed this issue to get a regulation into place. And now they are rejecting the regulation that's been proposed. My question is, if we can categorize this, which I think we can, as two sides of an issue, who on the other side, amongst the participants in coyote killing contests, amongst the hunters and people engaged in wildlife sports, who on that side of the issue wanted to promulgate a regulation, and what was the regulation they wanted to promulgate?
Thank you for the record, Alan Janae. So when you look at the history of this, I am going to take a little liberty in helping you understand. I know that legislators understand that this has been a long occurring conversation. It dates back to 2015. There was actually a petition at that time that was denied by the commission for outlawing of coyote contests at that time. 2016, there was an effort by some commission members to come up with a policy. That did not get anywhere. In 2019, there was a bill, SB 487, submitted to the legislature, never received a committee hearing. In 2021, there was again discussions by the commission that were initiated due to a Clark County resolution in March of 21. And so there was a commission action to consider a ban on all hunting tournaments. Again, that failed. In 2023, the legislature again picked up an opportunity with AB 102, attempted to prohibit competitions for certain animals taken for prize. It received one committee meeting, failed the committee passage deadline, was returned to the commission for resolution. This petition that we're talking about here, related to this conversation, was a petition submitted by Humane World for Animals, Humane Society, on March 8th of 2024. The commission at that time heard that. The petitioner actually withdrew their petition due to commission policy and wanting to basically hold the right for possibility to be heard again. After that point, the commission came to the place of thinking about how to deal with this. Commissioners are both here, chairman and vice chair, to walk through the process of how they handled that. It did create a contest committee. It held 3 meetings across the state of that committee: September of 2024 in Las Vegas, November 2024 in Reno, and January 2025 in Elko. And that was what this base regulation was off of. And so what you heard earlier was a gentleman, sportsman from Nevada Predators Association. It was one of the voices in the room that came up with this proposed regulation, but I will pass to the commission as far as a synopsis of what they heard out of that committee and the action by the commission, if that would help you.
Thank you, Director Janae, and thank you to the committee. I am Shane Rogers, R-O-G-E-R-S, and I'm the chairman of the Nevada Wildlife Commission. And to Director Janae's summary there, we did, as mentioned, create a committee to look at all of the issues around this. And as mentioned, we did hold 3 meetings throughout the state, one in Las Vegas, one in Reno, and one out in Elko. And a number of hours of discussion and debate over this topic, and really from that, from those various meetings, and based on the stakeholder input that we did receive, is when we as a commission then directed the department to begin the rulemaking process and draft regulations to really establish this season and license requirements for participating in these types of contests. So again, it was a long and arduous process, but this was again an attempt by the committee and certainly by the commission to find some middle ground with a regulation.
Thank you, Senator Scheibel. Paul Young, Board of Wildlife Commissioners, PAULYOUNG. Just to add on, not to repeat from Director Janae and Chair Rogers, like most regulations in legislation, there was 3 sides, and there was a total ban, don't do anything, and then a regulation. So, and that's what we got out of the committee. But the regulation was the vote of the subcommittee, and seemed to be, from what the subcommittee was representing, the majority of the conversation.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification. The one other question that I have is regarding the hunting licenses, because I'm hoping that somebody can point me to like a very specific statute or regulation that clarifies whether or not somebody currently needs a hunting license to shoot coyotes in the state of Nevada.
Thank you for the question, Alan Janae, Director. And so they are in Nevada, they are classified as an unprotected species, and so as such, a hunting license would not be required. As far as the specific statute or... She was so fast with the number, I'll let her say it.
Christy Knight for the record. The NAC that states that they do not need a license is NAC 503193, but it does state in NRS 502.010 that the commission can create license requirements for any wildlife, and then also that they can exempt any wildlife from a license requirement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee members, any other questions? Assemblymember Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one clarifying question. So both within statute and regulations, there are, policies laid out with regards to the hunting and taking of wildlife. Most of those are focused specifically on game mammals and game birds. And that essentially is, creates a legal framework for some of the ethical practices, because even though a license will be required, coyotes remain an unprotected species. None of those policies related to the hunting and taking of game animals would apply. Is that correct?
For the record, Alan Janae, if you could help me understand, I'm trying to better understand your question. Is there anything more I'm trying to understand it. Could you help me?
Absolutely. Thank you, Director. So, for example, there's violations that result in, receiving demerit points, et cetera, in terms of using various vehicles to drive or molest game mammals or game birds, hunting from helicopters, and so on and so forth. So again, my question is, game mammal, as I understand, has a very specific definition within statute and regulation. So, and one of the issues that was brought up in some of the public comment is that the use of optics or other guidelines on how these contests would be conducted are not present. And so I'm just trying to make sure that there's clarity that any of the kind of requirements or violations that are spelled out within that NAC, if it says game mammal or game animal specifically, that would not include coyotes.
For the record, Alan Janae, unless explicitly stated in there, it would not. I think of scenarios that have been discussed relative to technology in recent discussions regarding classifications of other technique or other, technology instruments. And some of those in early discussions have been more comprehensive than just game species, but currently, unless explicitly stated in the reg, I can't think of a situation.
Thank you.
Committee members, any other questions in Las Vegas before I check Carson City and online? Okay, is there anyone in Carson City with questions? I'm going to start with Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Unprotected doesn't mean unregulated. The reason I bring that up is right now, unprotected species include numerous fur bearers, badgers, both species of skunks, coyotes, raccoons, jackrabbits, of course. There are several species of birds that are unprotected. But you do regulate certain things. For example, if I went hunting and shot a coyote and was trying to sell the pelt, is it not correct that that is regulated by you guys at this point?
Thank you for the question, Senator. For the record, Alan Janae. And so, yes, when it comes to selling of a pelt, it does require a trapping license.
Even though they're an unprotected species?
Even though they are an unprotected species.
Okay, I think that's an important point, because one concern I had, and I know others, is that unprotected should mean unprotected, right? But in reality, we've always had certain types of regulations to ensure data is collected on certain things. And so this even though we are dealing with coyotes and unprotected species, there are cases where you have regulated certain aspects of their harvest. And so this, to me, fits into that type of a category, where once again, they are still unprotected, but there are, in certain unique circumstances, regulations to do certain things in very specific windows of time, September through March 31st. That's basically when the pelts are prime and they're not in their breeding, they're not having their pups, which is a very reasonable regulation. So to me, this regulation fits into that same type of a category where even though they are unprotected, this creates a limited but reasonable regulation to ensure that the data is available down the road and that we do have some information on these types of contests going forward. So in my mind, am I missing something? But you guys already do certain regulations on unprotected species, correct?
Thank you. For the record, Alan Janae, yes, that example that you provided is a great example of that situation.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions in Carson City?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I might, Senator Titus here.
Yes.
So mine is, I think, more of a comment. First, I want to thank you for being here and presenting this because I've heard a lot of testimony, and folks have absolutely a right to their opinions. And I heard a lot of testimony from Washoe County and Clark County. But I frequently will quote that there's a difference between a republic and a democracy. And the quote that I use is that the democracy is two wolves or coyotes sitting at a table with a sheep asking what's for dinner. And I think this would be a perfect example that we in the rules, myself included, I personally have lost sheep to coyotes. And my pushback initially was requiring a license to shoot a predator that has taken out my animals. But clearly this regulation was defined at really the quest and the pushback of folks who are vehemently against hunting contests, and they have every right and passion to that. So I applaud the Wildlife Commission for actually trying to solve this, saying, hey, there are folks who want to do this, there are folks who don't want to do this, but let's get some eyeballs on it and kind of regulate that. And I want to point out that the Wildlife Commission has made a compromise, because there's those of us, myself included, that would say, why would we need a hunting license to do this at all? But what I'm hearing is in good faith, you came up with a solution. And then I'm hearing absolutely no, they're not going to compromise at all. And so, I support I'm going to support this regulation, even though I personally don't think we should have to have a license to do so. But I believe that compromise is sometimes the best. I recognize that there are folks who are absolutely against this, but I think people need to recognize you're trying to solve issues that folks have really strong opinions about, and so do we in the rural areas. So I applaud the Wildlife Commission for trying to come with a compromise, and I'm frustrated that there are still those who no compromises in their future. Putting on the record that I thank you, and I'll support it, even though I have objections to it. It is still, sometimes that's the best, is to compromise. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I will go to Zoom and see if Assemblymember Hafen has any questions. Okay, seeing none, then I would be looking to see if there is a motion to approve Regulation R01425.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a first from Senator Hansen, a second from Senator Titus. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. And if you could raise your hands for me. Nay. Okay, I have a nay from Assemblymember Watts, from Assemblymember Backus, Senator Scheibel, Senator Nguyen, and Senator Dondero Loop. And I see, was there any nays in the north or online?
No.
Oh. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you for being here to answer questions. We are going to move on to the next regulation. The next regulation that we have up for discussion is R022-25, which is was requested by Assemblymember Watts, and I believe we have someone online from NIAA to help answer questions. Assemblymember Watts, when you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for being available. So I had a chance to review the updated regulation. I see that some adjustments were made from the last version in response to some of the concerns that were brought up by the Commission. And I do appreciate that. We have clear amounts spelled out here. The issue that I have, and I see in some of the backup documents that you justified the less than 600 pupil enrollment and the 600 or more kind of differentiation in the dues structure. I think the issue for me is I look at less than 600 pupils. Currently, that's set in regulation at 850. That's being proposed to increase not quite 2 times to $1,500. And in looking at this, it looks like this set of regulations was very first adopted in 2004. So if this has not been updated in about 20 years, then I understand the need with inflation and rising costs to update that. The concern that I have is that for the 600 or more, that dues amount is now going from $1.50 to $5 for each pupil. So it just, again, it seems when I look at those two amounts, the kind of percentage increase seems a little bit off. And you know, I tried to see if I could find some information on what your current budget is and the budget deficit and how this would address that, and was unable to find some of that information. So if you could speak to why this amount is increasing more than 3 times for the institutions with 600 or more pupils, that would be helpful to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul Anderson, last name's Anderson. I appreciate the question, Assemblyman Watts, and the explanation is this: the increase for the schools with enrollment numbers higher than 600 is roughly the same percentage as the increase that was to the schools that are 600 or less. It's and this was vetted through all of our member schools, including the Legislative Commission, which is the policymaking body of the NIAA, and that's composed of all the superintendents of the public schools as well as the charter schools. There's no objection from any of them with respect to the numbers that we've presented here through this regulation. And as you pointed out, and as was explained in our documents submitted, these dues have not been increased since 2004. As you know, the price of everything has risen significantly, especially in the last several years. One of the goals of the NIAA is to provide the best possible sites for state and regional competitions, and those numbers have just gotten out of sight. So these increases, as I say, are approved by the member schools, by the superintendents and the school districts, as far as the charter schools are concerned, as well as by our private schools. That's the best explanation I can give you. It's just basically the price of doing business.
Thank you for that. I guess my math isn't adding up the same way yours is, because again, when I look at the flat 850 moving to $1,500, that's a less than 2 times increase. And then you look at $1.50 per pupil to $5 is more than 3 times. So I don't understand how those proportions are working out to be the same. If you look at, just basic inflation, I would see justification for doubling these amounts, but not tripling. So again, and without understanding, really what the the increase in both the scope of the activities for the body is, or what the budget looks like. It's it's still an area where I have a bit of discomfort, even with what you brought forward. I guess the last question I have is, so how durable is this going to be? Is this amount sufficient just to meet your budget needs for, the next few school years moving forward? Or is this something that you expect will last a while? In other words, when will we expect to see you coming back with another adjustment to dues in order to maintain your agency's budget?
Thank you for the question, and I apologize for my lack of math. I agree with you. That is, it is about a 2.5 times increase, or 3. I'm sorry, 2.5 in the per pupil amount. But to answer your other questions, as you can see, with respect to the proposed language in the regulation, this dues increase is not going to go into effect next school year. It's the one following 2007, 2008. So we'll be going another year at the current amounts. This is designed to this increase is designed to assist with respect to budgetary needs into the future. It's hard to predict, and that's why the prior regulation that we presented back at the October 28th meeting, it was the hope, and I guess the request of the NIAA and its membership that the Board of Control of the NIAA be able to adjust numbers based on current circumstances. That was rejected, as you know, and we're thus proposing this increase with the hope that this is going to take care of the situation for an extended number of years, just as the original numbers have been in place since, for approximately 21 years now. But it's impossible, obviously, to tell. I mean, if there's, again, significant inflation, that I can't guarantee that there wouldn't be another request to amend the regulation to increase dues.
Thank you. And, again, I appreciate what you're saying. And again, when I look at substantial increases like this is one of the reasons why I think the Legislative Commission asked you to revise these, so that we have the chance to review them, and that you do not have the ability to unilaterally increase these fees at will. So again, I appreciate that this revision is responsive to that. My request is that moving forward, that you provide really strong justification about your budget trajectory, and that you consider more gradual and phased in approaches, right? You could adopt schedules to phase in implementation of some of these things, so that it is more predictable and manageable for the institutions, and it helps address rising costs, and keeps you from coming back to the commission seeking, at least in percentage terms, very large increases periodically. So thank you, Chair, for the indulgence.
Are there any other questions from the committee members? Down here in Las Vegas, are there any questions up in Carson City? Are there any questions online? Okay, Mr. Anderson, I do have a couple of questions. I went through the documentation that you provided, and it didn't look like anyone showed up to any of the hearings that you had. Have you guys received any oppositions from any of the schools to the increases, either by written opposition or calling you, or any of the previous hearings have shown up to oppose the increase?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, as I mentioned in my earlier testimony, this regulation has been vetted a couple of times, and there has been no opposition from member schools, from the superintendents or anybody else with respect to these increases. It's well known within the athletic community that these are necessary in order to continue to maintain the standards that the NIA tries to have with respect to high school athletics.
And I just have one last question, Mr. Anderson. I was under the impression that you guys have the authority to assess like a 20% special assessment on annual dues. Have you guys exercised that authority in order to keep up with the rising costs?
I am unaware of what you're referencing. I don't know that we have that in regulation anywhere.
Okay.
So I guess the answer would be no. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you. And I had heard that, so I just wasn't sure if that was an actual authority that you guys had. So you haven't had any assessments on annual dues, and it's been consistent over the 21 years.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that was all of the questions I had. Members, seeing no other questions, I would be looking for a motion. I have a motion to approve from Speaker Yeager. Do I have a second? Have a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay? Okay, seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, committee members, that takes us to our third regulation that was pulled for discussion. It was R026-25, and it was pulled by Senator Don Darrow Lewis. I believe we have somebody from the board here to help answer questions, and I see them approaching the witness table in Carson City. So when you're ready, Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do have a couple questions. Can you please go into a little more detail on why we would remove that requirement of board notification if a criminal charge is against someone is filed against, a licensee? And I understand that there may be a desire to, maintain innocence and what have you, but there's many positions that I think we might already do this for. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon. Jennifer Pierce for the record, JENNIFER, PIERCE. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Speech Language Pathology, Audiology, and Hearing Aid Dispensing Board. Thank you, Senator Don Darrow Loop. So this came out of a situation that came before the board, and I think the board felt very strongly that, as you mentioned, kind of the presumption of innocence until someone had been convicted, and felt as though it was not fair to ask someone to do that and to report that if then they, maybe dismissed or come off of their record at some point. And so that was the rationale by the board.
So I appreciate your answer, but we have people in positions that are taken into custody, and they are taken out of classrooms. They are taken off the street if they're a police officer, what have you. We have many positions that this happens with. So why would this particular position be that way? Is your interpretation of NAC 637B.046 subsection 2? So that would require the board to take disciplinary action if the charge were not reported?
Jennifer Pierce for the record. Yes. So the deletion is to take out the requirement for the licensee to notify the board of an arrest or a charge without it then being a conviction. The conviction part stays in that section. And then also it would remove the liability of the licensee if they were then to not have reported it, right? So if something happens, somebody reports it to the board 6 months later, they had not reported it within the required 10 days, then it becomes a disciplinary event for that person, whether or not they had been convicted or not. And so I think that was also part of the intent of the board.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll let others ask questions, and I may have one more.
Thank you, Senator. Members, are there any questions down here in Las Vegas? Are there any questions in Carson City? Are there any questions on Zoom? Okay, we're coming back to you, Senator, if you want to ask your questions. The floor is yours.
I guess I'm not sure that I heard exactly. I heard you answer the question that I asked at the beginning with why we would remove this requirement or remove the requirement of the board notification if it's filed against a licensee, but I guess I still need more information because we do, like I said, we have other positions that we do this for. So why would this particular license be different?
Jennifer Pierce, for the record, I don't believe that in the board's conversation there was any assumption or statement that this position would be different. I think the board felt strongly that on behalf of its licensees, it wasn't fair to ask someone to report something that wasn't a conviction, report it within a very limited time frame of 10 days, and report it when it may end up not ever being on their record. And so also then it would put them at risk of a disciplinary event if they didn't follow those reporting requirements. So the board didn't necessarily determine that this specific set of licensees should be exempt from this, but that the licensees in general of this board shouldn't be held to that standard, and that there was still a stipulation in that section that would require reporting if it turned out to be a conviction.
So does it depend on the infraction, if you will? In other words, I don't know. I have an auto accident. Somehow I'm criminally charged. Is that different than being someone who has had an inappropriate relationship? Is that different than someone who has been caught burglarizing a business? I don't know. Where is the distinct break in what is criminal? Because criminal is a pretty broad word.
Jennifer Pierce.
And I'm not a lawyer, but
excuse me, Senator. Jennifer Pierce, for the record, there was not a discussion or a decision by the board to sort of set limits or have a threshold at which it would be determined a criminal conviction. Typically, when we ask our licensees to attest to these, it's any criminal conviction that was not a civil traffic infraction that didn't involve alcohol or drugs. So it would be anything sort of beyond that version of a traffic infraction, and the board didn't opt to decide whether there were different versions of what needed to be reported, just that it didn't feel that it should be necessary for someone to report just the charge.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want clarification, just one quick question for me. So they don't have to report the charge, but if there is a conviction, they have to report the conviction, correct?
Correct. I think it's C or D in that same section indicates conviction. Yes, reporting a conviction. Jennifer Pierce, for the record. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Senator Wynn.
I just want to clarify because I'm not sure how other, I guess, similarly situated agencies act. So I don't know if you're able to answer this, but for example, if you are working with children in this profession and you are arrested and charged with, I don't know, child sexual abuse or anything of that violent nature, but you are able to bail out and you are out of custody pending that and there is no conviction, would you be able to continue to work with children while your case was pending if there wasn't any further court order prohibiting it? And is that how other agencies also work in this area?
Jennifer Pierce, for the record, I can't speak to the requirements or regulations for other agencies. Under our board statutes, unless our board takes a public action following a disciplinary complaint, that's a disciplinary case and goes through the process of the complaint and the investigation, and either is resolved through a consent decree where the person stipulates and accepts discipline, or there's a hearing. Our board really doesn't have authority to prohibit someone from working. In that case, it would be that the board could file an administrative complaint against the person and get that process going. But our board necessarily doesn't have the authority in our statutes to say you can't work at this time with anyone, or you have to stop practicing unless, that process were sped up and then there was an actual public reprimand and action by the board.
When you were promulgating this regulation, did you look at other agencies like teaching licensure or any other situated things to figure out how they handled a similar situation? It obviously gives me great concern that someone recognizing they might not have a conviction, but I don't want them working with my children if they have a pending case in that manner.
Jennifer Pierce, for the record.
No, as part of that, do you understand my question? What other agencies or what other regulations did you look at when you were making this?
No, I don't. No, we did not. Jennifer Pierce, for the record. Thank you.
I do have another question, Ms. Pierce. Thank you, Senator Nguyen, for your questions. How many notifications of charges filed against licensees do you guys get in a given year?
Jennifer Pierce, for the record. I can only speak to my experience. I've been with the board a little over 6 years. We've received one.
So leaving that item in the regulations isn't causing an overwhelming amount of work because you're not getting these notifications frequently that you guys have to investigate or have a board hearing about, correct?
Jennifer Pierce, for the record. Correct. No. No.
Okay, thank you for being here, Ms. Pierce. But I think I do agree with my colleagues, and I think it would be if you could just come back to a future legislative commission meeting and bring back more information on how other boards maybe handle this. I think that would be very helpful in helping us make a determination.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. Thank you, committee members. At this time, we are going to defer this regulation and no further action will be taken. Okay, committee members, that takes us to our next regulation up for discussion, which is R045-25. That was pulled by Senator Daly. And I believe we have someone in Carson City here to help answer your question, Senator. So when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have several questions and some of the language in the proposal. But I guess my first question, the basic question is, what happened with the process and the system that we had that then is requiring this, appeal process and various things? In other words, if there was a problem, what's the problem? There's probably multiple ways to try to fix it. I just have some concerns when we get to the other part after you answer this question. Is this the right way to fix it? I have some concerns with the approach. So what was the genesis? What's the problem? What is it that we're trying to solve, as my friend Marcus Conklin used to say?
Thank you very much. This is Kathleen Steele. For the record, I'm Program Manager for the Sagebrush Ecosystem Program. It's a good question. So when we created the regulations back in 2019, we authorized the program itself to certify verifiers to conduct our field work and our GIS work. We work across the entire state. We have a team of 5. We can't do all the field work and all the GIS work for the entire state for all the projects that are going on. So we train every week or every year, at the end of January, we train and certify individuals, private consultants, to do the work for us. It's a very complex GIS system. We train GIS verifiers, and then it's a very complex field plant identification, data gathering, field verification system.
GIS, go ahead.
What was that?
GIS.
Yes, GIS. So it's geospatial analysis using arc maps, using statistical analyses on the computer, just to start off the habitat assessment for greater sage grouse for our mitigation program for conservation credit system. So through that, we certify private individuals to do this work. We have found since then that while we do certify people, there are instances where we might need to protect our clients, our debit project proponents who are the industry, and then our ranchers who are on the credit side, from verifiers who don't have the highest quality of work, or who are their methodologies are a little dubious. So we've had instances where a verifier quotes a rancher an amount of money to do some work for them, conducts the work in a very poor fashion. The work is very sloppy, the data is concerning, and therefore then we require them to go back and clean things up to make it more legally sound, because this is the results of these cost millions of dollars. It could be a do or die situation kind of thing, where it's one little mistake could cost someone millions of dollars. So we want to ensure that these are the best. This is the best data, the best work possible. So we've had verifiers then have sloppy work, and we require them to fix it, and then they charge this proponent more money to fix it, and more money to fix it, and more time and more money, where we can potentially just stop it there. We've tried retraining verifiers. That's the whole process that's in here, is to offer retraining, to sit down and talk to them, to adjust our training methodologies. We have rewritten our training multiple times. But if there comes to be a case where they're showing bias, where we've had a verifier in the past who falsified data, field data, for the benefit of their client, to get fewer debits or more credits, one of the two, which again could save or cost millions of dollars. We didn't have, in the original regulation, we didn't have any authority to decertify people, and we wanted to be able to protect our clients, to protect the program itself and the validity of the program, by this opportunity to decertify people who are concerning to us.
So thank you. I think you probably raised more questions than I had before, just because maybe I don't know all of the ins and outs. So who do these verifiers work for, right? You said that the state has some, because in my understanding and the credit system and the back and forth is the verifiers are just there to measure how much impact is your project going to have. How are you going to offset that impact? Do you have credits, or are you going to do some other mitigation work someplace else, or put some other land that wasn't potentially excluded out of potential development, et cetera, or buy somebody else's credit? I don't know if you allow that. I think it's a flaw if you do, but nevertheless. So aren't these verifiers supposed to be third-party, neutral type things? And you said that they're working for a particular client, somebody that's coming in that's a proponent to the project, and the verifiers are employed by them?
Thank you, Kathleen Steele, for the record. Yes, so we certify, so these verifiers are private consultants, private companies across the West. It's not just Nevada, across the entire West. We have people of various states come in, send their employees to get certified through us, so that they can work with our clients. Then they are hired directly by...
When you say your clients, you mean their clients? They can work with whoever's applying to you.
Correct. So ranchers, industry folk, mining mining companies, roads, NV Energy, various clients who are putting out a disturbance on the landscape, some kind of business or a road or a power line out on the landscape. Those are our debit proponents that come to us. They're required through our regulation to come to us and offset that. So we determine the habitat that is lost based off of this disturbance, based off of their footprint that is being put out on the landscape. We determine the habitat that is lost. And then we also work with ranchers or the debit proponent themselves to create or preserve high quality habitat elsewhere so that we don't actually lose habitat in Nevada. We just shift it over slightly. So those are our credit project proponents as well. Generally, they are ranchers who are hoping to either restore or preserve their land. And then they get credits for that. And the debit proponents purchase the credits to offset their disturbance. So then that way the credits are kept on the landscape from 30 to 120 years. And either preserved, or we work with the ranchers to restore it. So the verifiers are, like I said, are consultants, and they are hired directly by these debit project proponents or the credit project proponents to do this work. We provide a list of who is certified, so we give basically our thumbs up that these people should know what they're doing and can do quality work. We provide that list to our proponents on both the debit and credit side, and they are allowed to hire who they will. And then those people go out and they do the GIS work initially, and then they'll do the field work if so chose to do debit side. They don't have to do field work. There's a little bit of a way to get around that in order to expedite things. On the credit side, we do require field work.
My mic turns off. So anyway, I think I understand a little bit better where we're coming from. So you guys go out and say, when I say you, the council, right? Because the council is the state authority, the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council. So you're saying we've verified these people are qualified to do this, and they can do it for either client, the debtor clients or the credit clients. And then they prepare a report or a recommendation that goes to the council.
Kathleen Steele, for the record, it goes to us, yes, as representatives of the council for the large majority of the work. Anything that comes up as specifics or something that's off the standard of what we have as our standard procedure, then we take it to the council. But anything that falls under our standard procedure, we handle internally as representatives of the council.
So there's somebody that the council has authorized to check the verifiers and say it meets this criteria, and then that becomes the deciding, you guys are the deciders on, is this correct or is this not? So when you find these particular problems, the one you said where people are acting inappropriately for their client, et cetera, so they're not actually neutral third-party people. So explain to me how this regulation is going to fix that. I see the part, and I don't disagree, where you're going to put in some additional requirements in order to be a verifier. So one of my questions was, do all of your verifiers currently meet that, or are you going to have a reduction in the number of verifiers? And then you're proposing a hearing, potential hearing officers. So one of my questions was, who are the hearing officers and what's their standard and what criteria and expertise are they supposed to have? Because you can have a hearing officer or an administrative law judge that doesn't know anything about what you guys do. So what are the qualifications to be a hearing officer? Then you have a switch where you can say, well, I don't want the hearing officer. I want to go to the council. And I think you create a whole separate problem of, well, we don't want this inappropriate activity to take place because and no offense to the people that are on the council, but they have their interests too. You got someone from agriculture, you got ranching, you got energy, you got people that have interest in, yes, preserving the habitat because they don't want the sage grouse listed as threatened or endangered, which would affect everybody. But they also then have the same potential conflicts of interest that you're saying these verifiers have. So I'm just not sure that this is going to fix your verifier problem and get to that by switching it to, no offense, those people on the council are not subject matter experts. They're not. Or they'd have all these qualifications you say a verifier is supposed to have. So I'm not sure that this is going to fix your problem. But if you can answer or explain, expand on any of those, I appreciate it. Or if I'm not reading it correctly, you can tell me that too.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. This is Kathleen Steele for the record. Okay, so I'll start with the quals for the verifiers. That is the standard. What we've included in the regulation is the standard procedure that we've always had internally since we started certifying verifiers. We just wanted to put it into regulation to kind of make it out there so that people are aware and something that we can point to should we not be able to certify someone. They just don't follow these qualifications. Currently, to date, as far as we know, all of our verifiers do fall under that. So they do qualify. We haven't lost anyone for that reason, but they are all qualified. The rest of the regulation outlines a process where should we find that there is an issue, a very concerning issue, and we've stated this several times throughout the hearing and workshop process, we are not going to use this flippantly. This is for various serious issues. This is the process is if we have a concern, we speak with them directly about the concern. Try to figure out, is there something that you're misunderstanding? Do we need more training? And come up with a game plan verbally. The second instance is write them, if this continues, the verbal doesn't work and this issue continues, we write them a official written notice. These are the problems, this is the game plan going forward. If that doesn't work, then we move on to the decertification process and with the hearing officer. Hearing officer qualifications, we didn't outline any qualifications per se. We originally had it as the director or deputy director of DCNR, which is our boss's boss all the way up. So we wanted to have a unbiased third party, but someone who knew the system a little bit, who our director and our deputies do know our process, our program, and the system, but we feel that they are set apart. However, we were not given the authorization to require certain duties in our regulations for the deputy director and the director of DCNR, so it was pulled out as just blanket hearing officer. But the intention is, as they are willing to ask of the deputy director or the director of DCNR. If they so choose, if the verifier who is in question so chooses, if they feel that DCNR is too biased or not enough for their hearing officer, they can choose to be put in front of the council. I was hesitant to include that because I do not want to slander people, innocent until proven guilty kind of thing. I don't want to slander them in public and ruin their chances for further work in general. I wanted to keep it a little bit more private until the official, like they're just off the list kind of thing. But if they so choose, there has been expressed interest from verifiers that they might choose the council as more a collective unbiased party, then they can choose that. I understand your concerns regarding the council. I think that they understand enough about the process. Our data collection and our analysis process is the exact same on both sides, on credit and debit. It is the exact same methodologies, the exact same process. And they understand, the council understands that, and they understand that if something should affect this, it possibly could affect their side as well. So there is an understanding of fairness on the board. So we thought that the council would be a good final say if something should come up. And that is the same across all of our documents. If someone should have a problem with anything within our program, they are more than welcome. I can put them on the agenda for the next council meeting.
So let me just follow up a little bit because I think I'm understanding a little clearer, and, and maybe there's a spot. I think there's a few other things that need to be done in this regulation, but we'll see. So when there was the inappropriate activity that you were talking about and you had this verifier, you're saying you didn't have a mechanism to decertify them or to get rid of them. And mainly the only thing that a hearing officer or the board would hear would be whether or not this person can still be a qualified verifier and get rid of them and, you know, whatever. And if they deserve to, if they were guilty, they deserve to have their reputation tarnished and let that be out there in the world. What happened to their recommendation? Who decides on, are we accepting this report? They gave too much credit here. They got a kickback from whoever on either side. It doesn't matter. Inappropriate activity. Was their report accepted? Do you have a mechanism to reject their report? If you don't, then there's another flaw, but nevertheless, because I think that's really the part. I don't want people to be able to potentially game the system and say, I put in this report, I'm getting a kickback from, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, whatever, and they still took my report, and now I'm just maybe going to get kicked out of being able to do this again, but I got mine and I'm going home. Was their report accepted? Do you have a way to reject that? And how often do you catch them doing this stuff?
Kathleen Steele, for the record, very good questions. Thank you. For that particular instance, their report was not accepted. We do have the capability to completely reject anything that is submitted to us under those cases where we feel that it doesn't match the on-the-ground actual habitat, the metrics there. The GIS, the map computer analysis was tampered with. We have the authority to reject and rerun, and we have a very stringent analysis process where we go through and check everything with a fine-tooth comb. Every report that is submitted to us, we rerun the desktop analysis, the computer analysis, to make sure that we get the same number that they get, the same answers that they get, so that if there is any tampering, we would find it immediately. My staff is very good about picking out issues, whether they're most of the time, 90% of the time, they're innocent issues, human error, a flaw in the field, something happened. Very simple. We usually just note it, we see if we can correct it, and we move on from there. For something like this, it was a huge issue. Luckily, their employer, under their consulting firm, their employer, we presented the evidence to their employer, talked to them about it, stated that we would need this rerun because the whole, all the data collected was suspect. And he ended up rerunning everything for free. And then we went out and also assisted in that to make sure that it was collected appropriately. So we were lucky in that instance that the employer was on our side, understood, and was able to help with managing that. And that person who collected the data is no longer with that company.
So, and understood, and that's good to hear. And I got to imagine that this isn't very regular, but the potential exists. So, and if I can just come back to one thing is when you guys reject, you review, and you're employed by the state, and you've got no axe on this either way, and want to make sure that it's being done correctly. Is there an appeal to your rejection of their deal. And that's the part that I would not want to have go to the board. If it's just whether you're going to decertify somebody, it's a little bit different issue, which I didn't get in the nuance until we asked the questions. But I don't think the board should be able to be the arbiter of the decision to accept or reject. And that's where I think that conflict would come in. So what's the process on rejecting or an appeal to your determination that this isn't good enough, it's not up to our standards? Or are you guys the final say? And that's that. And go back and redo it.
Kathleen Steele for the record. In our regulations, if there is a dispute about debits or credits on either side, the report, whatever it is, the program manager does have the final say. If they push it, they are able to go in front of the council and to complain. We have not had any instance of that at this given moment, but it is stated in our regulations that the program manager does have the final say.
Okay. And I have one question about the tribal land stuff, but the other thing I would say about what I would suggest if you're going to, have these qualifications is that you should include that they have to go through ethics training and prove to you that they went through whatever course you might say, accredited course, whatever, on ethics training. And then I know there's other provisions and various things where if they've done the work, like you said, they fudged, right? And the evidence was there. And the company that they employed said, hey, we'll do it again for free, and that guy's not there anymore. I think you should make that person who's certifying it, your verifier, liable for those things. I know attorneys are liable for that type of stuff. Plenty of other professionals, if they act unethically or go against the standards in the industry, that no, they're liable for it. I don't know if you can make it criminal, but you can make them liable and let somebody be able to sue them to fix those damages. I think those things on your verifier would go a lot further than some of these other requirements that you have, and I would suggest that. The other, on the Section 14, excluding the tribal lands, and I understand the whole issue and the sovereignty and all of that kind of stuff. I'm assuming the tribes wanted to be excluded for whatever reason, but I think it creates a different question on the debit versus the credit. So then if they're excluded, if the project's on tribal land, there's no rules. They can do whatever they want. And they don't have to do any credits or any debits. So the other side of that is it's on private land and the tribe is excluded. Would the tribe be able to gain any credits and sell any credits to give credit for things on tribal land? It can't work both ways. So if the tribes can still create credit to sell, but they don't have to mitigate any impacts, I think that's unfair. So tell me, is that the case, or is the tribes completely out and they can't be in the credit business? And if they can still be, I think that's another flaw in this.
So Kathleen Steele for the record. We count tribal land the same as private land. Private land does not have to mitigate for any disturbance on their land. We see that as their land. They are allowed to do what they will. Tribal land, we count it the exact same as private land. They are able to create credits. They just the same as private land with ranchers. They're able to generate credits and sell those, but they are not liable for building, let's say, a power line on their land. However, if they are generating credits on their land, if they are locked in under a management plan and they decide to then put in a disturbance, that will affect their credit project and they will lose credits. So it is a give and take. What they do on their private land, if they're in the system with us on credits, will affect their credits. Once they're in, their number of credits is affected by what they do on their land, and they could lose potentially credits if they so choose to put something on their land. So there is a consequence. They just don't have to mitigate, and that's the exact same as private land across the state of Nevada, and that was a decision by our council.
So they can't have it both ways. If they are creating credits, how do if I understood you correctly. So if they have a project that's entirely on tribal land, they can do it even though they may be disturbing the sagebrush ecosystem, and they don't have to mitigate, they don't have to do anything.
Correct, Kathleen Steele for the record, but their credit amount is affected by what they do. So if they decide they want to do credits, they want to generate credits, it will be a much lower, if not null. We probably would reject the project itself if they choose to put a debit project nearby or on their same land. So it's
So
kind of balanced.
they can generate credits that you guys would give them if they do something that protects the ecosystem. They can generate the credits.
Correct.
But if then they turn around and have the credits, they would have to hurry and sell them before they did some debit project, right?
No, those credits would be lost. Kathleen Steele for the record.
Not if they use them first.
No, even if they sell them, then it's considered an intentional reversal.
Okay.
And they are penalized per their contract with us and required to replace those credits either by purchasing or generating elsewhere. And there's also a penalty fee, an additional penalty fee on top of that. That's like I think it's $25,000 or something like that.
So
Don't quote me on that.
I guess I didn't understand why you were putting the words in tribal governments are exempt, the same as local governments. So, but it's not, there are safeguards in there for gaming this system because we're in a gaming state. I don't know if you noticed. Anyway, I do have some concerns about your solution. I would add those two things in, ethics training, and make them liable. That will solve your problem, almost guaranteed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Daly. Are there any other questions? Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. Are you guys, now where does the BLM fit into the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council? Are they part of it? I mean, most of the lands you're describing are public lands, most of which are administered by the Bureau of Land Management. Is there an appeals process to them for people that are not happy with your decisions?
Kathleen Steele for the record. They are ex officios on our council. So we have 9 voting council members and 8, I believe, ex officios from various state and federal agencies that are the directors of various state and federal agencies. So when someone comes up to appeal, they are able to appeal in front of the BLM as well. But BLM works with us. We have an MOU with them that they will honor our NAC, our regulation to require mitigation on lands that are habitat for greater sage-grouse.
Wow, so you guys, they actually have delegated to a state Sagebrush Ecosystem Council the authority over federal lands.
Yes.
That's interesting. I did not know that. That's actually surprising, frankly. Landscape scale you're talking about. Now, I actually have a ranch. I don't live there, but about half the time anymore I do. Right on the edge of what was the Charleston fire from 2005. It's come back beautifully. It's mainly, serviceberry, big sage, all sorts of sage species, beautiful bunch grass all over. I'm just kind of wondering, do you guys actually keep track of these big burns as well? And when you were doing these kind of decision-making processes, do you take into account the traditional changes in habitat that have occurred? And where do you guys factor in things like fires in an area where you're going to have, I don't know what exactly who comes to you guys, mines, or you mentioned ranchers several times. I'm just kind of curious as to how you factor in the historical changes on landscape scale changes.
Sure, Kathleen Steele for the record. Thank you. That was a wonderful question. For the debit side, we take it as a picture, a snapshot in time. For the debits, we verify what is on the ground at that given moment. If it was a fire and all it is cheatgrass or dirt, they are going to have a lesser debit amount because that's what it is, what it's going to look like when they disturb that area. So we take that as a snapshot in time. However, on the credit side, we do take into account fire history, especially something that's come back absolutely beautiful, and I'm very excited about that. We are working with several landowners who have had either a fire in their past or fire this year. We've had 3 of our credit projects burn this year, so we're working very closely with that. So for the initial credit assessment, we take what is on the ground at that given moment, and then we work together on a plan. So if it has been burned and it is not showing very good quality habitat, we will work with them on a restoration plan to get that back up into good quality habitat. If it does burn like we've had while they're in the system, we work very closely with them to put together a restoration plan, to get some money, some grant money to fulfill that restoration plan. And we keep tabs with that, and we note that in their file, and we make sure that we are aware of that throughout the whole 30 to 120 years that they are required to maintain that land. And then we keep track of the ecosites of that land, the vegetation that is currently in the past could be and future potentially could be on that land. And then we gear all of our management and potential restoration towards those ecosites. We keep track of state and transition models, and we monitor and work towards those transition models.
Okay, well, that's a great answer. But I guess I should make one thing clear. The Charleston fires, for the most part, higher elevation, more water, probably averages 6,000 feet. So it has come back naturally. If it's below about 5,500, 5,000, it's in so much in Nevada now, it's all cheatgrass. And unless a miracle occurs and you can keep fires from reoccurring every 10 or 20 years, it doesn't seem to come back. I'm kind of curious as to when you talk about giving credits, do you guys have any responsibility for figuring out a way to reduce the cheatgrass? I mean, that is definitely part, I know you're Sagebrush Ecosystem Council, but the biggest threat that I've observed in Nevada has been the dramatic expansion of cheatgrass. Right here, where we're sitting, if we look out at the Sea Hills, Carson City has actually hired a sheep rancher, and he comes in and grazes that aggressively every year. And since 2008, they've not had a repeat fire. And I'm just kind of wondering, do you have any authority to do things like, when we talk credits, what I'd like to see is sheep expand in certain parts of Nevada where you have this just constant cheatgrass infestation that just flat hasn't changed. In some cases, I've been observing the same piece of ground for over 40 years, and it still looks horrible.
So Kathleen Steele, for the record, thank you. So for credit projects, as it stands, we do require a cheatgrass management plan. We work with ranchers to reduce their cheatgrass on their land. We have had a lot of success with imazepik and other pre-emergents, reducing cheatgrass, especially after a wildfire. And that's with our ranchers. We are working on that. And we're very excited about this, we just got approved through our council to add in invasive annual grass management and restoration into our overall restoration goals. So we recently received that approval to move forward with that. We hope to step a little bit, not really outside of the CCS, but work on restoration projects on our own, very much what you're talking about, working with the BLM to reduce and manage cheatgrass and other invasive annual grasses on public lands. We're hoping to either use any credits that are generated, just retire them in our system as net gain, as we are just working better towards the landscape. They're not going to be sold. We're just retiring them, or slide them into our reserve account as a buffer due to the massive amount of fires. And just as you said, it just keeps coming back. We do need a little bit of a buffer. This is like an insurance pool for our landowners, that if something should happen on their land, their credits are being covered somewhere through restoration, through habitat restoration, until the time that they have it restored. So that's what our reserve account is, but we just recently got approved to do all that work, and we're very excited. We have several projects in mind along those lines.
Good. Last quick question. Sage grouse,
Correct.
Sage hens, population trends. As I recall, I think it was under Governor Sandoval that you guys came into existence in about 2013 or so. So, you've been doing this job for 13, 14 years. What are the trends that you guys have observed on sage grouse populations in Nevada? We have Endow in the background to back you up if you're going to try to pass the buck a little bit. But I would like to know, your observations, because really the ultimate purpose for your council to exist was to mitigate the possibility of that bird being listed as an endangered species. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is to enhance habitat. If you have successfully enhanced habitat for the last 12 or 14 years, is that reflected in the sage grouse population trends?
So Kathleen Steele, for the record, I will defer to Sean regarding sage grouse population trends. However, we have been working really hard for the last, so the CCS, the Conservation Credit System itself, our mitigation program, has been up and running since 2016. So we're about 9 years into that. Our first transaction, our first real transaction, getting it going, was required by our regulation in 2019. So we're actually 6 years then really into it. We have seen some increase habitat-wise. We are seeing more. We currently have more credits than debits at this given moment. So we are preserving more functional acres than we are losing, and that's why we're working on the CCS. But we've got it up and running. We're now starting to step into more restoration to see that further increase. So yes, on our habitat side and numbers-wise, we are seeing benefit. But I will let Sean talk about the population.
Thank you for the question, Senator Hansen. Sean Espinoza, Game Division Administrator, for the record. Just to put it briefly and succinctly, from the years from 2018 to about 2022, we saw sage grouse numbers be as low as we've seen them in the past 50, 60 years. So numbers did decrease pretty substantially during that period. The overall trend continues in a downward decline. However, more recently, over the past 3 years, we have seen a positive response. We link that more to precipitation, more favorable precipitation regimes that we've seen lately until this year. Hopefully that changes here very soon. And possibly some restoration type activities that have taken place on the landscape, such as pinyon juniper removal projects, a lot of reseeding, those types of things that have happened.
Good. So overall, the trend was down, and you see an increase to a degree over much of the state. I will say in the Charleston fire area, where I bought a ranch, frankly, there has been a substantial increase, in my opinion, in the last 5 years or so. And there's definitely been some very, very good moisture years. So undoubtedly that's related to that. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to indulge and get a little bit off topic. But I think the real purpose of the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council is ultimately what happens with the sage hens. Thank you.
Senator Hansen, would you like to make a motion, or are there any other questions up in Carson City?
Well,
okay,
I'm trying. There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair.
There you go.
I apologize. It was not cooperating. I did have a question, and I know that Senator Daley went into this, but I was very concerned about Section 6, Number 2, about the appeal process and the appointment of a hearing officer. And I just need to make sure that the council, the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council, is not the judge and the jury when somebody has an appeal, that the person, the arbitrator or the appeal person is somebody outside your organization. Is that correct, or do you appoint somebody within your organization? Because that's where my concern is about your being the judge and the jury.
Sure, Kathleen Steele for the record. As it internally stands, it's not outlined in our regulation. As it internally stands, we have the hearing officer set as either director or deputy director, DCNR. However, we can appoint whomever, a third-party unbiased person. We can have it as our DAG. I'm not sure who else to talk to or to bring it in. We can even bring in our state-appointed intermediates, or however someone requests.
So the person that has been denied, and again, just in Section 6, so if the applicant is being denied, they have a right to say, I don't want that person. He's part of your program. I want this outside person. So I just need some clarity because, again, I was very concerned about that particular process.
As it states in our regulations, The appeal must be heard by the hearing officer as appointed by the program manager, which I am more than willing to bring in someone who is, as if they want, an actual unbiased person. We have had people before who are like, let's talk to this person, but that person's like their cousin. I just want to make sure that it's actually an unbiased person. I feel that the director is quite unbiased, but if someone has a concern, we can bring in definitely someone else. I am more than open to something to make it fair and equitable.
Thank you. And that's my concern. It's not in the process here in this language. I don't see where if the applicant says, well, wait a minute here, this person clearly is biased. How do they then appeal that and bring another person?
Kathleen Steele, for the record, I don't think it is included. It's just the hearing officer, or if they would like to bring it to the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council.
Thank you. That's what I was concerned about. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions in Carson City? Are there any questions in Las Vegas? Are there any questions on Zoom? Seeing no other questions, does someone want to make a motion for regulation R04525? Okay, I have a motion from Speaker Yeager, a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay.
I'm also a nay. Thank you.
I believe that is Senator Daly and
Sorry,
Senator
nay.
Titus. Are there any other nays?
Nay.
And Senator Hansen. Okay, I have 3 nays. Oh, Assemblymember Hansen, I correct that. Assemblymember Hansen, not Senator Hansen. So 3 nays, the motion carries. Thank you. And committee members, I believe that takes us to our last regulation for discussion, which is R053-25, which was requested by Senator Hansen. And I believe we have the Board of Wildlife Commissioners with us still to help answer questions. Senator Hansen, once they approach the witness table and you're ready, please go ahead with your questions.
Thank you. I'm waiting for the 27 NDOW people to show up here at the desk. They're almost all here now. There they are. Okay, real quick, Pike, no problem. Question I got is on the bait portions. Section 6 on page 20 on mine. The use of any game fish or protected species fish or parts thereof for bait is prohibited. Would that include, like a common practice is you're gutting your fish and you're going to keep fishing and you find roe or something in the fish or use the gills, I've seen people do, and they use that as bait. Would that be now illegal when you mention or parts thereof?
For the record, Kim Tisdale, Sport Fish Staff Specialist for the Department of Wildlife. You're correct. Parts thereof would refer to cut bait or fresh roe taken from game fish. That would not be legal.
Okay, so the fish comes out of the water. If it was allowed to die naturally, the same parts would remain in the water, but now it's going to be a crime if somebody like myself uses some internal organ or something to fish with. Is that correct?
That is correct, Kim Tisdale, for the record.
Okay, I got a real problem with that. Next, same page at the bottom, any fresh, dead, or frozen saltwater species of fish cannot be used for bait except in certain appropriate regulations in different regions. Why? I mean, saltwater fish parts that are saltwater, including sardines, anchovies, and shrimp, cannot be used as bait. They obviously can't live in freshwater. There's no saltwater I know of in Nevada. What's the problem with using those?
For the record, Kim Tisdale, we are allowing the use of saltwater fish for bait. Saltwater fish cannot survive in freshwater environments, and they are exempt from people can have possession and transportation of saltwater fish in Nevada.
Okay, that's only where the use of aquatic bait is authorized. I mean, aquatic bait would include saltwater species. Is there some danger of transfer of something? I'm just kind of wondering why you would limit that as a bait. except where aquatic bait is authorized. This normally you have aquatic bait restrictions because of dangers of northern pike as minnows and so forth. There's no possibility of any saltwater species surviving in any of our waters. Why would we limit the use of that to only where aquatic bait is authorized? Pardon me for not phrasing that correctly initially.
Sorry, Kim Tisdale for the record. We aren't restricting their use. We're just specifying that the use of fresh, dead, or frozen saltwater species is allowed in Nevada wherever the use of aquatic bait is allowed. So.
Okay, well, normally, again, well, okay. You get my point. I just don't see why that would be regulated at all, period. Next, page 22, you may have already answered this. The capture, possession while fishing or use of fish as bait, whether dead or alive or parts thereof is prohibited. Same thing if somebody is fishing and they want to use a part of that trout or whatever, that is going to be illegal going forward in that section as well then, correct? A little bit redundant perhaps since you already covered it in the first question, but.
Yes. Kim Tisdale for the record. The bait regulations for all the different regions do restrict the use of fish as bait, whether dead or alive or parts thereof, in all areas except where they are allowed, and it is specified in statute here where in each region the use of bait is allowed.
Okay, so same question on page 23, basically, number B. Other forms of aquatic life and animal life, including limited to crayfish, any unprotected or parts thereof, which are commercially prepared, may be used as bait, but you're getting rid of aquatic bait may be used only in the water from which it's taken. Wouldn't that also apply for a fish that's removed from that body of water and you want to use parts of that for bait? Why will you guys strike that out? Why? I'm just kind of wondering why, if the fish originates in the same body of water that you want to use it as for bait, and if it was allowed to just naturally do whatever it does, it would still remain in that body. Why is it going to become a crime for somebody to use a piece of fish that they caught, for example, as bait? And the rationale behind it.
Kim Tisdale for the record. This NAC is referring to the use of bait in the eastern region. Previously, the use of any fish for bait was prohibited, and the use of any, with the exception of preserved salmon eggs, the use of any unprotected species of freshwater fish, including those that were commercially prepared or preserved, was prohibited. So there was no ability it was unlawful to use live fish for bait or even commercially prepared and preserved fish for bait. What we're proposing here is changing that. We are still prohibiting the use of fish for bait and their parts of game fish, but we are allowing preserved baits to be used. These are baits that are readily available in all the tackle shops.
Salmon eggs or the minnows that they have preserved.
Yes.
Question though is, what's the rationale in that's really what I'm getting at. Why does the Department of Wildlife want to make it a crime for people who want to use a piece of fish from the body of water that the fish was removed from as bait? I'm missing something here in this discussion.
So for the record, Alan Janae, Director of Nevada Department of Wildlife. And so you can look at many instances where the average citizen may not know the species of fish that they have, maybe malintent of garnering a live fish from one location, taking it to another as a possible bait fish. Their perception of dead is a little bit different than ours, and we have had situations where we have pike is a great species that has been introduced illegally. There have been other places where we have actually had to treat fish populations, Tui Chub in the Wild Horse Reservoir. We actually had to historically treat that to remove those because they had overrun that reservoir to the point where game fish were no longer thriving. And so this is one of those places where we're just trying to minimize the risk around illegal introduction of unintended species into Nevada's water and the impact on our sport fish.
Okay, I see where you're going with it, but to me, you should have kind of like your cross out in B. If it comes from the water from which it was taken, I can't see why that is going to be. It's not going to cause what you just described. So my concern, look, we're always making new rules, and these are laws, and then they get enforced. And so some poor guy fishing on the bank, who the warden says, "Hey, what are you using for bait?" He says, "I ran out of bait, and I'm using the gills off of the fish." And suddenly this guy's getting a citation for something that, in my opinion, is absolutely harmless as far as the dangers of introducing, unwanted species. It is interesting to bring that up because, it was the Fish Commission back in the 1870s and 80s that introduced carp to Nevada as the new game fish that everybody, so like, oh my gosh. But anyway, so I don't know. I just got to, as far as the pike and cutting holes in the ice and that, I think that part of the regulation is fine. I just think you may have gone a little too far, in my opinion, on the bait side of this stuff. I think we need to make some kind of an exception for fish that are removed from that body of water. Parts of those could be used for bait. That just seems completely reasonable to me. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I just had one point of clarification, Kim Tisdale, for the record. That part that we crossed out, aquatic bait may be used only in the water which is taken. We removed that because it's stated earlier in 502 in the statewide bait regulations that you can only use aquatic bait from the water in which it's taken. So that's a statewide regulation. So we're not removing that, but it's just aquatic bait, which is
right. I know it's defined. I'd like to say aquatic bait and fish that are removed from that body of water. That would make it reasonable at that point, trying to prevent the dangers that you're talking about. So obviously, I don't think this is something that's a life or death issue, but I'm definitely sensitive to this constant expansion of law, which then innocent sportsmen who didn't really commit any crime, in my opinion, end up getting cited and paying fines and so forth. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Are there any other questions in Carson City?
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator Titus here. Thank you for the indulgement. And again, thank you for being here. I have a question, and I understand the regulations are specific to locations. I'm a catch and release fly fisher person. I never use live bait. And so there are specific regulations in these areas where it's clearly marked barbless hooks, no live bait, et cetera. So I understand part of that. My question actually was in section 11, and it was about, I'm an ice fisherman also, though, in the wintertime. And I don't use a chainsaw to cut the hole. I have a drill. And a drill that drills out the hole. And I'm looking at these regulations, and I was just going, why can I only cut one hole? I have had to cut multiple holes because, there's no fishing where I start. And so I don't understand why I have to cut one hole, and I have to keep that block. I have to keep that block of ice that I've cut out on, I guess, and put it back in. I mean, can you explain to me why I am only allowed to cut one hole? And if I'm keeping that block and putting it back in because there's no fish in that hole, I can't go and cut another hole?
Thank you.
Because I've been there and done all the above, so.
Sure. Thank you for the question. For the record, Kim Tisdale. The regulations that you're referring to, what we're doing here with this regulation is the way ice fishing has always worked is they're restricted to fishing out of an ice fishing hole that is no more than 10 inches in diameter. The regulation that we're adding here is allowing people who are spearfishing and bow fishing. This is only at Cummins Lake through the ice. Those people employing those methods are allowed to cut a hole that is 12 inches wide by 24 inches long. So this is a larger hole than what we allow for regular ice fishing. And these holes are only for bow fishing and spear fishing. And so we're restricting the number of holes, mostly just for safety concerns. We don't want people, these are a larger hole. So we want to limit how many of these are on the landscape. And, retaining the block is just, putting that block back in the hole kind of allows that hole to refreeze overnight. It prevents more open, soft ice in these larger holes that are being cut for bow fishing and spear fishing. So it's not so you can still cut as many holes as you want for regular hook and line fishing.
Because I would certainly, thank you, and Madam Chair, one other follow-up. I guess I just needed the clarification that and I understand that this is a bigger hole, but are looking at regulations in other states, Minnesota, those kind of areas where they have a lot of ice fishing and they have big open things. Is this re-entry of the block and the keeping of block, is that standard in those other areas?
For the record, Kim Tisdale, we did look at a lot of the fishing regulation in the Midwest where they have a lot of ice fishing, and that is where we got this. I think a lot of states want the ice block to be put back in the hole so it doesn't create a problem for transportation across the ice, because if you have these big blocks that are sitting on the ice and left there, then they refreeze, and then people who are running across the ice on their snowmobiles, can run into these things, and that can be a big mess. So that's, I think, a lot of the purpose for that, but we also did not want these blocks to be sitting on the ice, and we thought it was a good way to just require them to put that back, create less of a hazard for people who might be on the ice.
Well, thank you. I just want to make sure that when I'm fishing at Wild Horse and I'm not getting in trouble with my little hand drill, that we're trying to create my ice fishing. So anyway, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions in Carson City?
Just, if there's no questions, Madam Chair, if I could just take one moment. I just in response to the line of questioning here, if this group has been paying attention to the regulations over the years, is most notably Fisheries Division, most notably Kim Tisdale has actually been doing a heck of a job at trying to simplify Nevada's fishing regulations and trying to make them much easier to comply with in working with our law enforcement division. And so we've been trying to shrink the size of our regulation booklet and also all of the particulars of it. But I am in one sense very glad that you called up Staff Specialist Kim Tisdale, because she is going to be retiring in this next spring, and her career would not have been complete without a presentation to the Ledge Commission. So thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, if I could comment on that. I was going to say they need to put you in charge of the Shed Antler program. That's the case. And by the way, I love your necklace. I would recommend that highly as a gift for Christmas. Thank you.
Senator Hansen, and seeing no questions down in Las Vegas, do you want to, well, first I'd like to congratulate you on your service and on your retirement, and then toss it back to Senator Hansen for a motion, or?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm a no on this one.
Oh, that's right.
I was not there on the bait yet.
Okay. Well, I'd be looking for a motion. I have a motion from Speaker Yeager, a second from Senator Nguyen. With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
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 If you could raise
very
your
mild
hand.
nay. Very mild nay.
I think there was two. I know it was Senator Hansen who.
This time I'm going to support him. It's a no.
That's a shock.
That's
Our
Assembly
marriage
Member
may survive
Hansen.
yet, Madam Chair.
I have 2 nays. The motion carries. Thank you for being here to answer questions. With that, I believe that completes all of the regulations that had been pulled for discussion today. So thank you, commission members, and thank you to the representatives of the state agencies who hung out with us to help answer questions. Now we can move on to agenda item number 5. I do believe that we have lost the Secretary of State, but we have Mark Voloshin here to help with the presentation and to help answer questions. And committee members, Senate Bill 54 from the 2023 legislative session required at least once every 2 years that the Secretary of State prepare and maintain and publish an elections procedures manual to ensure correctness, impartiality, uniformity, and efficiency in the elections procedures of the state. So the manual must be submitted to the Legislative Commission for approval not less frequently than every 4 years. And I believe that Mr. Voloshin has already approached the witness table. So Mr. Voloshin, if there are any statements that you would like to make or any presentations, please feel free to do so now, and then we will go to questions from the committee.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee or commission. My name is Mark Voloshin. I am the Deputy Secretary of State for Elections. My name is M-A-R-K, last name W-L-A-S-C-H-I-N. I'm joined here today by Ms. Heather Hardy, who also works in my elections division. We are here on behalf of Secretary of State Francisco Aguilar, who, again, as you, I think, Chair had noted, was in attendance down south until, unfortunately, his schedule pulled him away. We're here today before you to discuss a landmark piece of work that will benefit both Nevada's elections officials and members of the public. The Elections Procedure Manual has been in development for years, and we're presenting it to you today for formal approval as required by Senate Bill 54, which was passed back in 2023. I want to start by reassuring you that this manual is aligned with state statute and regulation. It provides clarity and plain language explanations about the many different elements of our electoral process. Elections administration can be complex, but it is our job to ensure that this process is transparent and understandable. This manual is our effort to help citizens be more engaged with their state and local government, whether they want to understand how to run for office, register to vote, start a PAC, or submit a petition. The Elections Procedure Manual will also help with the onboarding of new staff in our state, county, and city election offices. All 15 of our elected clerks will be on the ballot in 2026. And as we continue to see turnover across all levels of election officials and their staff, this manual will help ensure that they have a better starting point than we did. I would like to thank Heather, in particular, who has taken lead on the development of this manual and who's made a point to gather feedback from the county and city clerks, their staff, and members of the public. We held 3 separate meetings totaling about 4 hours to get feedback from the public on the manual. We weren't required to hold those workshops, but the feedback from the public is just as important as the feedback from other election officials. Finally, the work on this Elections Procedure Manual is not done. We intend it to be a living document that receives frequent updates and improvements. We are going to continue to make non-substantive changes, including adding more legal citations and further improving the plain language. Earlier, there was a comment made by a member of the public during the original public comment about Assembly Bill 148 and the concerns about codifying that into the statutes online. The Elections Procedure Manual, you will note, actually cites AB 148 specifically, but that's an example of one citation that will update to the correct statute once those changes are made online. We will plan on bringing back major changes for approval prior to the start of the 2028 election cycle. That concludes my presentation, and we're available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Voloshin. I know we have questions for you, and the first person who expressed interest in asking questions was Assemblymember Backus, so we will start with her first.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Mr. Voloshin, thank you so much for your presentation. My question is, as I understand, we've kind of moved forward to this wonderful comprehensive manual. And so looking forward, because obviously for Legislative Commission, we handle regulations and dealing with changes. Can you kind of elaborate a little more, like what would require the Secretary of State to come back before the Legislative Commission with respect to changes that could be made to this document? And specifically, I noted, like, for example, under the bright yellow-green tab of the manual, which is Appendix A, it has like specific references to the 2026 election, including folks that hold those offices. And so all I kept thinking when I was looking at that appendix, is that like something that you would have to bring back before us if like a judge had retired midterm, that kind of stuff?
Excellent question, Assemblymember Mark Voloshin, for the record. So to be perfectly clear, those sorts of changes like you're describing, the list of elected officials, certain dates, the elections calendar, for example, also in Appendix A, those would be considered non-substantive changes. And in fact, we have a list that I'd like to put on the record just to make sure that everyone is clear on that. We consider non-substantive changes to include grammar and syntax, spelling, typos, punctuation, formatting, citations and hyperlinks, and minor factual corrections, including dates and addresses. And as you mentioned, perhaps a list of elected officials. Someone may resign, an appointee may be put in their stead. Those sorts of changes we would make and update online so the public have access to that immediately. Larger changes that you will see, I suspect, during leading up to the 2028 election cycle, we are looking at adding in more detail and additional sections relating specifically to the role that the Secretary of State's office plays, for example, during a legislative session. It's an important part of the electoral process and what the Elections Division does, again, especially when it comes to transparency for the public. Not included this moment, but also likely it needs to be added, but that would be enough of a big change that we would come back to the Legislative Commission. Also, changes to the structure of the document itself. If we are thinking about eliminating or combining sections for clarity, again, large sections, not just rewording a single sentence, those are the type of topics that would ultimately be captured, worked on during the interim period, but in a separate document, not the public-facing approved one, of course, that we would then bring back in draft form to the Legislative Commission prior to the 28 election cycle. Does that answer your question?
It does, Madam Chair. May I have a follow-up? My next question would be, and thank you for that, because it makes sense what you were saying. And I also am appreciative of all the citations to the legislative and administrative code authority. But just out of curiosity, like with this manual, and I know in other states, it could be used to maybe derive policy that may be different than existing law. My understanding, though, and if you can explain, like the Secretary of State's office can't do that with respect to the law that passed here.
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Mark Voloshin, for the record. Absolutely, that you were spot on, and that is correct. In other states, and an easy example is Arizona. The Arizona Elections Procedure Manual carries the weight of law. It is, in essence, as I'm told, and I'm not an expert on Arizona elections law, but it is their administrative code, captured in their elections procedure manual. That is not how our statute in NRS 293 created this procedure manual. This manual cannot conflict with statute. It cannot conflict with regulation. It is absolutely not an opportunity or a means by which the Secretary of State or his office could somehow bypass the legislative process or the regulatory process. The manual is very much intended as a user guide, taking complex statutes across our 9 chapters, plus the regulations, and in some cases incorporating federal law, and explaining it so that a new staff member who's hired into a county elections department can take this book and quickly understand how to administer an election from their point of view, be it, again, part of my staff in the elections division or in a county or a city across our state.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the questions.
Assembly members and senators in Las Vegas, are there any questions down in Las Vegas? Okay, seeing none in Las Vegas, I will go to Zoom to see if Member Hafen has any questions. Okay, I will go to Carson City to see if there are any questions in Carson City.
I think we all have questions up here, Madam Chair, and if it's all right, I'll go first. Thank you, sir, for being here, and thank you for reaching out to me and wondering if I had any questions. And as we chatted, I have concerns, multiple concerns. First and foremost, I think, starting, if I might, Madam Chair, literally the political history of Nevada. And when I read that chapter, and again, I understand the manual, I understand you're mandated to do it, and I appreciate that, the clarity on all of that. But I have big concerns in just a paragraph, and it says, while Carson City is the state's capital, Clark is home to 70% of the people, and then it talks about, and sessions of the legislature are conducted both in person and virtually. And I do take issue to that, because sessions are not conducted in multiple locations, in Las Vegas, et cetera. Sessions by our Constitution are held in our capital in Carson City. And so as we talked, I know many folks that have moved, most folks that live in Nevada now haven't been here very long. They chose to be Nevadans, and I welcome them, but they haven't had any civics lessons on where we are. We meet every 120 days, et cetera. And the fact that that doesn't add clarity to the fact that this is the capital, this is where sessions are held. Now, certainly interim committees are held just like this one is, and we have folks in Carson City and in Las Vegas and virtual, and I appreciate all of that. But I just wanted to make sure that indeed the understanding is clear that we meet every other year for 120 days and that they are held in Carson City. So I do have exceptions on that. And if I might continue with a question now, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you.
Titus.
So specifically on questions, I know in the past election cycle, there were cards mailed out by your office to get voter turnout, and again, I think I appreciate that. And I did have some concerns about who you were reached out to. And in this manual specifically, you prioritize outreach to youth, campus-based populations, non-English speaking communities, and Native Americans. But I don't see it actually identifying comparable outreach to people in my areas, in our rural area, rural Nevada, and senior citizens, veterans, and military families. And I think I really need to ask, but rural voters have sometimes they'll face long travel distances, limited polling locations, unreliable broadband, mail delays, and I've had people communicate to me recently. We lost our mail carrier in my rural community, and it was way backlogged. So seniors can't get their transportation. What programs have your offices done to reach out to those folks, the people that I represent in the rural areas? And I'm just concerned that I understand the purpose of the manual. I understand you're mandated, but I'm concerned about how is the reach out to all Nevadans that need to vote or would like to vote?
That's an excellent question, Senator. Mark Voloshin for the record. So first, to clarify, in regards to your concerns about the political history, I do appreciate you taking the time to explain that. That is considered absolutely an important but non-substantive change that we are going to make. I did talk to the Secretary about that, and he's aware of that as well. So first, I want to reassure you that we will address that. Second, in regards to outreach, you're right. Ultimately, all 2.1 million of our registered voters across our state warrant the same outreach, period. In regards to the rural specific, minus Clark and Washoe, we're looking at about roughly 240,000 registered voters across the other 15 counties. Again, firmly believe that each and every one of them, their vote matters. Their ability to ask questions of the state and county election officials to get clarity on timelines, processes, is no different than anybody in any other part of our state. So to that end, we do make a very much concerted effort to reach out to every voter. And in fact, you'll see in your mailbox here in the very near future a postcard that has been sent to every voter across the state. In addition to that effort, Secretary Aguilar has made a very deliberate point also to personally go to every one of our counties, including our tribal locations across the 28 tribal areas across our state. Again, those meetings have also not only talked about election specific, but also other elements of the agencies. So talking about entrepreneurship or securities, investor fraud issues. Again, each one of the divisions, while I may be a little bit partial to elections division, every one of the divisions that he represents and leads provides an amazing service to the constituents. And they are all wrapped together in regards to that outreach. That will continue throughout next year. We do also have plans to, again, not only lead, but also support the county election officials in their outreach efforts. This is something that, again, knowing that while I'm here in Carson and we have staff in Las Vegas, ultimately our county and city election officials know their communities the most and have, frankly, the best ideas on how to reach out to the voters in their communities, especially those voters who may find it too difficult to vote or think for some reason that it's challenging or have concerns. And so by supporting the county and city election officials, by asking and engaging with them to make sure that as they identify obstacles and challenges that we're supporting either through the purchase of outreach documents or providing information, or even in some cases the secretary himself or us sending staff to those locations. These are all ongoing efforts that have started before and will continue through the general election of next year.
Thank you for that follow-up, Madam Chair. So
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. So I appreciate that. I mean, and you referred to referring actually back to the county clerks, and that's their job for the outreach, et cetera. But again, your department, at the state level has chosen to reach out to the voters, but again, specific populations. And I was concerned, I know the card went out to specific populations because we had this discussion. I was just wondering what the outcome and what metrics are you using to see if that outreach actually had any effect on the voter turnout?
In regards to the metrics, Mark Voloshin for the record, Senator, there is a direct correlation, too, between voter turnout in one election cycle and our efforts in the next. Again, there's highs and lows. Presidential general elections typically have the largest turnout across the state. A midterm primary historically has the lowest turnout. So we're careful to assess based on the realities of the electoral cycle over a 4-year period. But we do track, and again, we try to identify communities that across the state, not just in Clark and Washoe, but truly across all 17 counties, and try to identify where folks are not turning out, where they may be viewing obstacles. We, again, talking with the counties, talking with community leaders and otherwise, there's a number of metrics, but including voter turnout is the most prevalent of those to identify areas for improvement for that outreach effort.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the questions.
Thank you, Senator Titus. We will go next to your left to Senator Hansen.
Actually, just back to political history. I just, this document should be as nonpartisan as possible. And you talk about none of these candidates being kind of a unique feature. And the only example you give is in 2024, none of these candidates won the Republican primary for President of the United States. Now, that is about as partisan a statement as you could put into a thing, because that's the only example in the entire book that I found where you guys didn't just mention that we have it and it is kind of unique. You specified probably one of the most controversial elections in the United States history, and you used only this party, my party's example, that my base didn't like President Trump, is what you're really saying. So to me, that disqualifies this as something that is a nonpartisan, just a general election oversight. It's clearly got a built-in bias right off the bat. So I'm very uncomfortable with that. That is not something the Secretary of State should. When he's running for office, that's one thing. But when he's putting out a document that's this thick in its election procedures manual, and he uses an example like that in the very beginning of this entire manual, it taints the whole thing. So I'm a strong no on this. I've been going through the whole thing, and I haven't found any other example like that. So, again, that's not the kind of thing that the Secretary of State should be putting out in an election manual, okay? So, with that, that's more of a statement than a question, Madam Chair. So, thank you. I'm going to definitely, if this is
It's an
vote,
actionable
we're
item.
going to vote on it today, an action item, thank you. I'm a no, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Hansen. We will go to your left, and I believe it's Senator Daly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions, and I recall when the bill came up in legislative operations elections, I was on that committee. In my understanding of what we're trying to do here, and I understand completely what you were saying, is that technically it's not a regulation, so it doesn't have the force of law. We have statutes, we have regulations that cover all of these issues. But what we did have, especially coming up with some of these more contentious elections that we've had in recent years, a divergence of what it all means, and do I have to follow it, and what is the procedure that I'm required to follow because I get to decide in my county. And that's not the case. We have state law, we have state regulations, they have the power of law, and these people are required to carry out their duties regardless of whatever other concerns they may have on a personal level. So this manual, in my view, despite all of that, I won't even respond to my colleague's accusation of bias, but nevertheless, as I recall, the person in question that would have probably won the primary didn't choose to participate in the state of Nevada, and that's how come none of the above one. So just remember that as well if we're going to have that discussion. Never mind. So this obviously is not the law, but this is trying to give guidance so that every single official who's administering a regulation or administering an election in the state of Nevada has this handbook, this user guide on what the laws are, what the standard operating procedure is, what's expected of them under Nevada law and from the Secretary of State, who is the ultimate administrator of all of the elections. So is this just mainly meant to get everybody on the same page so that we can actually have the processes go forward? And I have a separate question follow-up on a couple of things, but I want to understand the purpose of the manual and where we're at.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Mark Voloshin for the record. Yes, and I think the answer to your question lies in the statute itself, in NRS 293-5202 sub 1. The intent of the manual is to ensure correctness, impartiality, uniformity, and efficiency. So exactly like you're saying, get everybody on the same page by statute. It does specify later in that, actually the next sentence, that each county and city clerk is required to comply with the procedures, which, to your point, while it doesn't carry the weight of law, because the regulations and statutes essentially built the foundation for this procedure manual. If the manual says you have to do A, B, and C, it's really how to implement the statutes and regulations that exist. And a non-compliance or a violation of that would essentially not be a violation of the manual, but would be a violation of the statutes, to your point.
Yeah. And I think, as I recall, I insisted when we were doing the legislation that the manual had to come in front of the Legislative Commission, because our current Secretary of State's not going to be Secretary of State forever, whether you like him or not. The next Secretary of State is not going to be able to say, hey, I'm going to develop the manual and I'm going to turn over all of these other things, and you say I can't be in violation of the law, but I interpret it differently, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to put these rules and procedures in place, and if there's any substantial change, I understand we need to change names, or maybe some dates, punctuation corrections. I know you mentioned all of those things. But if the substantial portions of the manual are going to be changed, they have to come back in front of the Legislative Commission so that you can't have some nefarious intent to try to say, yeah, no, you don't have to mail out ballots if you don't want to. That would be a violation of the law, but nevertheless, people were trying to do those things, which instigated the need for this. So the question on that is, who's the cop on this, on the enforcement? So you guys have enforcement over the Secretary of State's office on enforcement over all of election rules and various things. So you're going to rely on the statute, but you're also going to rely on the manual. So where's the teeth in this if people are not following it? And I know there's a couple statutes. I brought them with me today, but I'm sure you know them as well.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Mark Voloshin for the record. Yes, again, in essence, and I know this has been both Secretary Aguilar's point of view, really actually over the last couple of years, to work collaboratively with our county and city election officials. The enforcement mechanisms, again, that we have taken in the past, if there's questions or concerns, it starts with a phone call. Questions about what's going on and why, if there's something that we're missing or maybe a misunderstanding. From there, it can escalate, again, to letters and communications between the Office of the Attorney General and county or city attorneys, which has occurred also. And frankly, that's usually where it gets resolved. Oftentimes, it's just a misunderstanding or maybe two different opposing views of a certain statute that maybe could use some clarity through regulation or otherwise. But again, ultimately, the statutes are the gold standard. We will follow the laws and enforce those laws across all 9 chapters. And I'm proud to say that the county and city election officials that we work with understand and eagerly agree with that approach.
Yeah, and one more follow-up quickly on that. My understanding, and you can tell me if it's different, but from what I've seen, what I've heard testimony on in the committees and various things that we've been on is, by and large, the clerks or the registrars in the 2 larger counties, the people that are required to follow these rules in administering the election, by and large, they've been on point. They're trying to do their job. I think some of the pushback has come from the county commissioners and people with other agendas trying to, hey, you got to do it this way because the county commission said that's the way we're doing it here. And so what, has that been your experience as well? Is that basically the people that are responsible are trying to do it pretty much, and if they get pushback from other elected officials in their county, they have this manual in the laws to go back and say, we're not doing that.
Thank you for the question, Senator Mark Vlasen, for the record. Well, I can't speak necessarily to the private conversations between some of our county election officials and either other county leadership. I certainly don't want to point fingers inappropriately. I do know that the biggest discrepancy that I have seen so far when it comes to the implementation across Title 24 is really a local interpretation. Again, Clark County, 1.5 plus million registered voters. Eureka, about 1,203 at last count. Different resource pools, different requirements, but both the registrar and clerk, as appropriate, are striving to achieve conformity with the statutes. So who's or if people are pushing or encouraging with a negative approach, I couldn't speak to that specifically, but I do know that again, when we talk about compliance with state and federal law, the big discussion comes down to, well, how we do it here is because this is why, because of our resource pool, because of the size of the county, right? Nye County, the third physically largest county in the entire United States. Clark, I think, is 12th, 13th by population. So there's unique physical and demographic challenges when it comes to implementation. But across the board, again, happy and excited that our clerks and registrars across the board reach out. We discuss with each other best practices. We learn from each other. We make sure that everything's, when a question comes up at all, we discuss it with the Office of the Attorney General. So it's not me or my staff arbitrarily making a determination. Like, we seek outside counsel. And our lawyers, I'm happy to say also, rarely give me the easy answer that I would like to hear. They say, this is what case law says, and here's what you need to do. And if that's the case, then roger that. We get together and we move forward with the hard, correct thing to do. And that has been the case in the 5 years that I've been your state election director. But specific to who's pushing and prodding, otherwise, I couldn't speak to that.
And I understand. It was maybe an unfair question. Final question, Madam Chair, and just maybe it's for legal counsel as well on this. You mentioned that non-substantive change, you may change something in the Nevada history. You talked about punctuation, syntax, grammar, et cetera, and I understand that. So, and maybe that's for legal. So if there was going to be some other change, who's determining if it's substantive or not? I know you've tried to outline it as best you can, but like I say, we're not going to have the same group of people forever, and they may say, well, I don't think this is substantive, I'm going to do that. You go with the Attorney General. Is LCB the gatekeeper? You said that we could just go online and we'll make those changes online, so you can amend this apparently through your office and what gets put up on the website. Is there a notice requirement to the AG's office, to the LCB, to say, hey, no, we think you crossed the line here, you got to bring that back to the Legislative Commission? Who's the gatekeeper on that? And how do we make sure that it is followed?
Excellent question, Senator. Mark Vlasen, for the record. So we've discussed this with our legal team in regards to, and I don't want to speak for LCB Legal, but it is our understanding that in the past, when we've talked with them, they try not to make recommendations or give guidance to executive branch offices that they view as the role of the Office of the Attorney General. Our plan, though, again, recognizing the importance of transparency, right? I would, if I was and I guess I technically am just a voter, but also if I looked online and a government document that had been approved by the Legislative Commission was just kind of randomly getting updated without any explanation as to why, that would, I don't think that would please me. We're going to track changes. We're going to have a tracker very similar to the one that we submitted as part of the agenda item that captures what those non-substantive changes are, so that somebody that looks online and sees a copy of the procedure manual and says, wait a minute, it looks slightly different from 2 months ago, they should be able to track exactly why and what we changed. When questions come up about the nature of a substantive change, again, our plan is to go to the Office of the Attorney General. It may well result, frankly, in a regulation. I may be back in front of this committee in a couple months proposing a regulation that captures what is and what is not acceptable. Not that I'm trying to make regs for regs' sake, but to your point, I think it's important that we do clarify that in writing somewhere so that my future successor and Heather's and the secretaries and everybody else's has a clear understanding of what is acceptable and why, so that frankly members of the public can look and see and understand what changed and what isn't changing.
And I'm sorry, Madam Chair, you made me ask another question. Is there a process, or is there some rule, or is there something in place that requires any change, I don't care which it is, to provide notice to the LCB, perhaps whoever the chair of the Legislative Commission is, so that we can say, hey, there was a change that was made, and that we can look at it, we can ask our council to say this and that, and the Legislative Commission, not the LCB, can make a decision that says, hey, we think you crossed the line and we want you to come in. Is there a process for that where the Legislative Commission can then exercise their right to say, we think you made a substantial change, and you need to bring this back in front of us?
Thank you, Senator. Mark Vlosh for the record. Short answer is no, there is not a process in place.
Sounds like a bill to me coming up.
I was gonna say, or possible proposed regulations, Senator, that may come back in front of the body, but not currently.
Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to just move to the left. Assemblymember Hanson, did you have questions?
I did. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. I've had a chance to look over a few things and a couple of clarifications, if I could. And actually, I was glad to hear that you addressed a comment from the public. I think it's important that the public know that we really do here on the dais, and those of you in the audience, you listen and you try to address those concerns. So could you clarify a little bit, because I was trying to make notes when the caller brought up about AB 148 and having that addressed. If you could clarify exactly what their concern was and how you're addressing that.
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Mark Vlosh, for the record. I will summarize what Ms. Gifford mentioned in the original public comment, and I do hope if she's listening to call me out if I missed something. But it was my understanding, because she participated in the public meetings that we had, and her question was specifically, Assembly Bill 148 had been passed. It changes laws. It's in effect. But when you go online, if you Google NRS 293 and look, it's not reflected currently. She was concerned, as I recall, about how do you cite something like that in a procedure manual that's been changed, that is absolutely an in effect law now, but yet is not online in a way that the public can see. So while that is that process, the codification does fall under LCB's requirements, and I know that they are working very hard on that. I explained that we capture it as a citation to Assembly Bill 148 and other bills that were passed. And then once that statute is updated, we would change from Assembly Bill 148 in parentheses 2025 to NRS 293 point something.
Thank you for getting that on the record. And that brings up some of the issues that I ran into. And I get this. This is new. This is a document that, like you said, is going to be a living document. It's going to need updating. What's happening for me is I'm going online, and this is just for the transparency thing, because when we get into election security and integrity, there are legitimate claims, and it doesn't make you a conspiracy theorist, right? They're just the machinations that you're going through, that we're trying to get clarity on. And so when voters are concerned about integrity and they go and they say, oh, it's not up online, I don't see it. I ran into that with going to the Secretary of State's website versus going in the manual. And to your credit, I appreciate that you've got the voter challenge form listed in the manual in the section under, I think it's under voters, where voters, if they have a concern over an address, I know just from personal experience, being in my own campaign, other campaigns, the lists, we have to admit, say it aloud, the quiet part out loud. The lists have been a mess for years. When you go to the voter's door, they've moved, they've been gone, they died, whatever. It's just not being updated quick enough, right, for elections. That has been a common complaint I've heard from constituents, and I've seen myself. And so I'm hoping that with, is it the voter registration elections, the VREMs, I think you referred to it as, that passed in 2021. and you're in the third phase of it, where you're going to be able to communicate with the counties and get things more clarified with lists, catch discrepancies, help with investigations. Can you give us an update how that's going, the VREM system?
Absolutely.
And what it is going to address that we haven't previously been as good at addressing?
Absolutely, Senator. Mark Voloshin for the record. So voter list maintenance, I do want to start by saying that is a critical component to the electoral process. That's something that, again, at the state, county, and city levels, we're fully aware of and embrace, right? It not only does it increase, strong list maintenance increases confidence in the process, it saves all of us money, taxpayer dollars, so that a ballot isn't being sent to an address for somebody who had moved 5 years before, or who had passed away 6 months before, or frankly, who had been incarcerated as a felon, 6 months before. So those processes we continue to look very closely at. We talk again with our counties who are primarily responsible under statute for the maintenance of those lists. And when it comes to improvements, the VREMS project that you speak of absolutely is contributing to an increase in the transparency and effectiveness of our voter list maintenance processes across the state. By doing so, by coming together under that bill, which proposed and is mandating a centralized voter registration database, we're now able to, in a more timely manner, compare, identify individuals who have moved from one county to another, so that way we can, properly act on the previous registration and move somebody from Nye to Carson. We have a better and new process, frankly, in the last about year with the Department of Corrections that now comes to the state on a daily basis, so that every incarcerated felon who is incarcerated as of today is on a list that comes to our office on a daily basis, instantly bounced against that statewide centralized database, and then those county election officials are notified so that they can cancel the voter registration as appropriate as well. If that person's released the next day, their name's off it and they can register again, no problems too. It's an incredible improvement. But similarly, all of our different checks and balances that we used to do in a much more deliberate, slower manner, including the sending of notices as required by 293-530. There's a process to inactivate somebody. All of those have been greatly improved and expanded upon. The Secretary, as Chief Officer of Elections, has got a greater ability to audit and make sure that the appropriate things are being done in a timely manner in a way that we, frankly, used to not be able to, so that we can make sure, as we work, again, collaboratively with our clerks and registrars, that those appropriate list maintenance functions are being done, regardless, again, of the turnover of the staff or the clerk or the registrar, or for that matter, the Secretary, as we look to the future. But that is a critical part of the process, and I'm very happy that you brought that up. It's important to all of us.
And Chair, if I could just follow up with one last question.
Yes, go ahead, Assembly Member.
Thank you. And what I was bringing up too, I mentioned in the manual, I see the challenge when a voter wants to challenge another voter that's in their precinct, or say you don't live there. I think that's a requirement. You have to be, if you're going to challenge a voter as a registration, you have to be in the same precinct or the same district.
So we have a few different types of challenges. I'm Mark Voloshin for the record. I believe the one that you're speaking of is 293-547. It is a challenge that requires you to be in the same precinct as those individuals. But there are others where you don't. There are other challenges where you have to be an elector or a reliable person. So I think part of what we're trying to achieve here with the manual too is to clarify. Again, I don't assume that your average Nevada voter intuitively knows 535 versus 303 versus 547 challenges, or what the timing are and those sorts of things. But our goal is to provide clarity and a more clear process to make those sorts of steps more accessible to the public.
And if I'm not mistaken, the forms are online on the website, although the form I'm seeing on the Secretary of State's office is not the exact one that I see in the manual, but maybe that's because the manual's not been approved yet. And also just a heads up for anybody who's listening, when you go to the link for Washoe County, it says there's nothing there. It just says URL not available for their county form to do a challenge. So we have some challenges.
Thank you for highlighting that, Assembly Member. Mark Flosh for the record. Again, constant improvement as I see going forward, corrections to hyperlinks and those sorts of things, but I appreciate the feedback.
Okay, seeing no other questions in Carson City, I'm going to Las Vegas one more time. Members, any questions down here? Okay, seeing none, I would be looking for a motion to approve. Okay, I have a first from Speaker Yeager. Do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
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 Okay, I believe that is Senator Titus, Senator Hansen, and Assemblymember Hansen. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Vlashin, for being here today to present and to help answer questions. Committee members, that now takes us to agenda item number 6, which is the designation of membership of legislative interim committees. Here with us today is Roger Wilkerson, our Deputy Director and Acting Director of the LCB. Roger, do you want to lead us through this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Roger Wilkerson, Deputy Director for the record. In your packet, you'll see a set of recommended appointments for one body this afternoon, the Regional Rail Transit Advisory Working Group. This is a one-shot interim study created by Assembly Bill 256 of the 2025 regular session, which requires its members to be appointed by the Legislative Commission and for the working group to report back to the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Growth and Infrastructure by July 1st, 2026. While AB 256 provides that the working group elects its own chair and vice chair, I believe that it is the intent of our chair that the legislators appointed to the working group be elected chair and vice chair, because otherwise the LCB would be prohibited by law from providing staff support to the working group. If you wish to proceed, the appropriate motion would be to approve these appointments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. And yes, it was my intent in the conversations I had that Assemblymember Carter chair the commission and Senator Daly vice chair it so that LCB could staff it. Members, any discussion?
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Senator Titus.
Hi, thank you. I would like to disclose that my son-in-law is one of the persons proposed to be appointed by the Legislative Commission to the Regional Rail Transit Advisory Working Group created by Assembly Bill 256. And because of this relationship, would meet the definition of immediate family in Senate Standing Rule number 23. I am hereby making this disclosure for the purposes of that rule and will abstain from voting on appointments to the Regional Rail Transit Advisory and Working Group. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Titus. Any other members? Okay. Seeing none, I have a motion from Speaker Yeager to approve, a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Okay, one abstention and the remainder of the votes are a yay. The motion carries. Thank you, committee. I will now move on to agenda item number 7, which is the appointment of members to committees and similar entities. And again, we have Mr. Wilkerson here to assist us with this item, and I will hand the mic over to him.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Roger Wilkerson, Deputy Director for the record. In your packet, you'll see recommended appointments for one body this afternoon, the Nevada Silver-Haired Legislative Forum. I'm happy to provide further information if you wish, but in the interest of time, I'll leave that to your discretion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. Members of the commission, do you have any questions or discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, I have a motion from Speaker Yeager to approve. I have a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. And that brings us to agenda item number 8, the request for additional meetings for the Sunset Subcommittee. We have with us the chair of that committee, Assemblymember Shea Backus, to present the request and to answer questions. Assemblymember Backus, do you want to say a couple words about why you'd like some more meetings?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I think you know probably I'm personally sitting on the Sunset Committee, but as chair of the Sunset Committee, I am respectfully requesting 2 additional meetings for the Sunset Committee beyond the 4 already approved by this body on October 28, 2025. The additional meetings will ensure the Sunset Committee has a productive interim by allowing the committee to meet as frequently as it usually does. Since its inception in 2011, the Sunset Committee has consistently met 6 or 7 times each interim. Prior to this interim, the Sunset Committee was a subcommittee of the Legislative Commission with an unspecified number of meetings. With passage of Senate Bill 226 from the 2025 legislative session, the Sunset Committee is now a standalone committee and the Legislative Commission approves the number of meetings. However, the committee's workload remains the same. I would also note that the Sunset Committee appears to already be budgeted for 6 meetings. And with that, Madam Chair, I would thank you for your consideration of this request. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. One of my favorite committees. Members, any questions for the chair? Okay, seeing none, I would look for a motion to approve. I have a motion from Speaker Yeager, a second from Senator Nguyen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, committee, this brings us to our next and final item, which is our second period of public comment. We will be accepting public comment at this time from persons here in the Nevada Legislative Buildings in Las Vegas. Then we will be moving to the Legislative Building in Carson City, and then to people who would like to provide public comment by phone. I would like to remind everyone that public comment will be limited to not more than 2 minutes per person. And if there is anyone here in Las Vegas wishing to provide public comment, please approach the witness table. Okay, I do see someone approaching the witness table. I would like to remind you to please state your name and then spell it, and then you have 2 minutes to provide your public comment. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Jean Coquilla, Coquilla. Thank you for the opportunity to offer a brief public comment today. I'm here to raise some concerns regarding NRS 116, which governs homeowner associations in Nevada. And I'm not here to describe isolated hardship, but rather a systemic structural issue that continues to produce irreversible harm for homeowners across our state, particularly for seniors and veterans, without meaningful opportunity for correction once escalation begins. And there's 219,000 veterans in the state of Nevada, 55,000 people have Alzheimer's in Nevada, and there's 3,700 homeowner associations in Nevada. And in Nevada's non-judicial lien framework, enforcement actions are many times done by integrated companies. And the fees can escalate without court oversight, without confirmed receipt of notices, without meaningful opportunity to cure once the process advances. So when communication breaks down, the penalties and fees can accumulate rapidly, sometimes exceeding the underlying obligation many times over, even when where homeowners have attempted to comply, they've paid the fees, or they've already remedied the alleged violations. So, and I just wanted to be clear, this is not about eliminating HOA governance. It's about basic communication safeguards, ensuring that notices are actually received, payments are properly processed and credited, and homeowners have a clear documented opportunity to resolve issues before penalties escalate into financial devastation or loss of housing. So I've personally documented multiple cases which violations were corrected within required timelines and dues were paid in advance or in surplus a year in advance, but the fines continued to accrue into tens of thousands of dollars, not to mention the loss of equity, over $300,000 and $400,000 in equity, leaving homeowners with no practical recourse other than costly litigation. And alone in one day, I did see notices of default, liens, notices of sale, and that's only in one day. There were quite a few, so it's not an anomaly. In other states, Texas, Florida, California, they've already implemented reforms to curb these types of outcomes. So Nevada has the opportunity to adopt narrow, targeted safeguards that protect homeowners while preserving legitimate HOA authority at no cost to the state. So I respectfully ask that this issue be referred for interim review, or that a narrow bill draft request be initiated to study and implement basic communication and notice standards under NRS 116 so that irreversible harm.
Thank you for your testimony. And if you have it in writing, if you would please, if you'd like to hand it in, we can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else in Las Vegas? Okay, seeing none, we will move to Carson City. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to provide public comment? Okay, seeing no one in Carson City, we will move to the phone lines. AVH, do we have any callers?
If you'd like to participate in public comment, please press *9 on your phone to take your place in the queue.
Hello, this is Ellen Gifford again. I'm grateful to hear that others are also interested in the topic of improving the timing of updates to the NRS. If there is anything additional that I'm required to do to make my request for an investigation official, I'd appreciate your guidance. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. AVH, are there any other callers?
Yes, there is, Chair. There's one more caller on the line.
Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon again. Fred Volts, VOLTV for the record. In the last legislative session, SB 78 intended to begin the process of reforming how the many state boards and commissions operate. It failed to emerge from committee hearings. Acknowledging that the Sunset Committee lacks sufficient time to review the hundreds of boards and commissions in depth, the conversation with Assemblymember Tracy Brown May suggested that the Legislative Commission would be an appropriate forum to present an alternative method. A citizens committee would be composed of individuals with specific requirements, vetted first by the State Department of Personnel, with 12 finalists submitted to the legislature for review and approval. The Department of Administration and Governor's Office of Finance would create summary information about each board and commission. Business and industry would facilitate Zoom meetings and act as secretary and technical advisor to the committee. Tasks would include evaluating elimination and consolidation, ensuring proportionate representation of all Nevadans, balancing technical skills with the concern of regulatory capture, recommending an ongoing nominee review process, creating a list of standard qualifications, and ensuring universal remote access to all board and commission meetings. An outline of the particulars will be submitted to LCD for inclusion in the meeting minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. AVH, has any other callers joined?
The public line is open and working. However, there are no more callers at this time.
Thank you, AVH. Commission members, seeing no other business before the Legislative Commission, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your participation today.